A catastrophe struck the world, but our hero had money and power, and while others suffered, he reaped the reward. While other people tried in vain to achieve anything in this ruthless world, risking their lives, he simply enjoyed himself. The rest of the people looked at him with envy and hatred, because only this one guy was able to achieve everything without making any special effort. Something incomprehensible was happening around him. The boy looked at the timer, the seconds of which were mercilessly ticking away. He emptied the entire store and acquired supernatural abilities. A huge glowing tiger appeared next to him. He constantly defeated his comrades. I wonder who else was capable of such a thing. Our hero had everything he wanted. His two beautiful companions looked at him with admiration and even some fear. Now he had everything. With all this wealth, the boy was so confident that he proclaimed himself a savior. And indeed, he was chosen by the heavens, wasn't he? In the real world, everything was going on as usual. In front of us stood a large house with a truck circling around it. Several movers were bustling around it, carrying heavy boxes. Human voices and someone's indistinct swearing could be heard everywhere. While the porters were busy carrying heavy boxes, the boy stood near the entrance and talked to a man. It turned out that our hero, whose name was Yoon, had decided to help the local shelter with the items. This old man was the boss and thanked the boy. With a wave of his hand, Yoon said that there was nothing special about it. He was doing it from the bottom of his heart, simply wanting to help. Turning around, the guy walked away. In fact, he did everything for a reason. He was awarded points for good deeds. Our hero's full name was Lin Guo Yoon. He had neither a home nor a car. His parents had passed away, so to speak. The boy was a complete orphan. But he still had someone left. It was his uncle Lu, and the guy decided to visit him. He was already standing by the fence when the old man approached him. Lu was a security guard. When he saw Yoon, he asked, "What are you doing? Doing good deeds again?" The boy shyly scratched the back of his head. Such was the last will of his parents. The thing is, our hero was tied to a merit system, and for every good deed he did, he was awarded points. It was simple. After finishing his daily duties, Yoon entered a dark room, opening the door with a creak. Well, he was home, and light penetrated inside. He walked past the shelf with a photo of his parents, who looked happy there before they went missing. He remembered that day when the whole world turned blood red and a catastrophe struck, taking many lives. Our hero sat at a small table by the window and thought for 2 whole years, doing good deeds and earning points for them. He took a few sips of cool water and looked out the window into the night. However, something was still not right. The guy slammed the glass of water on the table. He had no points available in his balance. He couldn't use them, roughly speaking. Moreover, the poor guy didn't know what it meant to use these points. So far, he had just been saving them, and that was killing him. Suddenly, everything around him began to flicker red, and the water in the glass also turned the same red color. The poor guy crawled back and looked ahead with frightened eyes. It seemed to him that the blood moon had risen again, and the whole city was covered with some kind of red veil. Yoon sat on the floor and trembled. Jumping to his feet, he looked at the city, which was covered in red. The blood moon was shining right into the window, and something around him began to change. Seeing the message from the system, our hero was frightened. It turned out that he had passed the test of original sin, and now something was supposed to happen. But the problem was that Yoon had no idea what it was or how to use it. Suddenly, Yoon felt something prick his finger. He looked at his hand and saw a small drop of blood that felt real. The entire space around him began to be covered with interference as if on a television. There was a crackling and creaking sound, and the world began to change. Suddenly, everything began to disappear as if it had never been there. There was a pop like a gunshot, and the guy stopped and looked ahead. Suddenly, a message from the system appeared again. Our hero looked to the side and narrowed his eyes. What the hell is going on here? While the system was talking about some new plugin, Yoon grabbed his head and tried to pull himself together. Calm down, man. Now is not the time to panic. Deciding to find out at least something, he approached and asked the system if the invitation to the game was still available. The system replied in the affirmative. Worse, Yoon noticed that a countdown timer had appeared, meaning there was nowhere to run and he would have to accept his fate. What a mess. Armed with his phone, Yoon began searching for information on the internet. With trembling fingers, he scrolled through the newsfeed. There had to be something. A warning appeared on the phone screen. If you learned about the game Original Sin from someone else, please contact us and visit our archive. In the game Original Sin, there are many monsters that are dangerous to human life, and the Security Bureau is engaged in their destruction. The main goal is to survive. Messages popped up on the phone screen, one after another. If you lose your life, all your progress will be lost, but you can also earn untold riches in this game. Yoon began to dig through the notifications. It seems he had some advantages in the form of this strange plugin. Well, let's try it. Thinking, the guy bit his thumb. Okay, so you have to protect your life. There won't be a second chance. Let's try it. In a few days, Yoon managed to gather food, water, medicine, and at least some clothes, which was already something. But as soon as he finished his preparations, everything around him began to flicker with these strange disturbances, and things began to dissolve. It was as if the whole world had collapsed. The ground flew out from under his feet, and the poor guy flew somewhere very deep into some kind of hole. And now, frightened and trembling, he sat at some strange table and stared wide-eyed in front of him. Turning his head, Yoon saw several more people sitting nearby. There was a deathly silence. No one said anything. Suddenly, one of the people, a middle-aged man with gray hair, fell off his chair in surprise. Yoon immediately jumped up to him and tried to help. "Grandpa, are you okay? Maybe you need help." The young man helped the old man up. The people sitting nearby did not even bat an eye, but simply exchanged meaningful glances. A man with a small beard suddenly asked in a stern voice, "Are you all new here? Am I right in understanding that no one has tried playing before?" A girl with glasses was sitting next to him. She asked in a frightened voice, "You're not new to this game, am I right? So it's all true." Sighing, the man tapped his fingers on the table. "Yes, all the information is accurate. If you become a player, you will have to participate once a week." Yoon listened carefully and looked at the strange man. It seems that this guy knows more than everyone else. I should take a closer look at him. After the man finished speaking, the guy in the cap and the girl with glasses cried out in unison, "This is pure madness!" Losing his patience, the man slammed his fist on the table with such force that it cracked, and everyone around him fell silent. His eyes became wild and bloodshot, and his voice became rough. "Yes, you're right, this is a dangerous game. It will be played once a week until you lose your lives." Sitting opposite him, Yoon folded his arms in front of him. At first, it seems that this man is just trying to intimidate us, but in fact, he is sharing his experience. Quickly orienting himself, our hero clapped his hands and said in a sweet voice, "A person as experienced as you can't have any problems with survival. Teach us." The man looked at him and softened a little, a predatory smile appearing on his face. "Okay, there is something. Listen to me carefully, kid. Don't get involved in other people's business. Your life is the most valuable thing you have. Remember that once and for all. And yo. Second, forget about common sense. Here, there is everything you can imagine. Demons, spirits, ghosts, magic." Calming down, the man raised his finger meaningfully and said, "Most importantly, there are a few rules here. If you break them, you'll bring trouble upon yourself." Thinking, Yoon began to recall that the website did indeed mention some rules that could not be broken under any circumstances. Suddenly, he heard a voice. It was a girl with long white hair. She said she had received a notification that the store for newbies had been unlocked. After these words, notifications also began to appear near the other players, and their stores were unlocked. The same man waved his hand. "Well, take a look. If you have eyes, you will only be able to buy after the first round." The girl with glasses looked at her notification with surprise and interest, but didn't say a word. Suddenly, a dissatisfied voice was heard. It was a guy in a cap. "What's the point of opening a store if you can't use it? It's some kind of mockery." Finally, the old man also raised his hand and addressed the man. "Listen, we can get money for these points, right? That's right, isn't it?" He smiled and looked condescendingly at the old man. "Listen, you're a good joker. Points can only be exchanged for in-game items." And then Yoon smiled. It turned out that the system offered him to exchange virtue points for game currency at a rate of 10 to 1. It was a gift. The guy immediately began counting on his fingers how many points he would get, his cheeks glowing with joy. Our hero already imagined that he would be able to get 14 million points, a whole fortune. So that's what they're for, it turns out. Okay, let's open the newbie store. Yoon began to study the interface with interest, which now didn't seem so strange to him. There were various potions and items to improve the gameplay. In principle, they weren't that expensive, so he could stock up to his heart's content. After thinking for a moment, the guy realized that he only needed to spend a few thousand points and the store would be completely empty. Well, so be it. He snapped his fingers and ordered the system to exchange 10,000 points to go all out. Dozens of notifications about receiving items immediately began to appear near his face, and a smile spread across the guy's face. Suddenly, from somewhere on the street, he heard someone's squeaky voice. Another wonderful time of the year when the ghost wedding is celebrated. The guy in the cap and the girl in glasses looked at each other fearfully. Outside, 2 lanterns were burning, and a strange voice could be heard. "What the hell is this?" The same man slapped his hand loudly on the table. They closed their mouths. "The game is about to begin. Enough chatter." Somewhere in the house sat a ghostly figure. Somewhere. I saw strange clothes. 2 candles burned nearby. A voice could be heard humming a strange song. A notification appeared in front of the company. "Survive until the end of the wedding." People raised their heads and looked ahead with frightened eyes. Suddenly, strange figures resembling zombies began to appear around them. Their eyes were burning, and they were eating. A girl with white hair looked at these people with disgust and asked in a trembling voice what was wrong with them. The man who had already taken on the role of leader sighed. "Better not to ask. The less you know, the better you sleep. You know the saying." Suddenly, a strange, bald old man appeared behind the boys. He asked in a creaky voice, "Dear guests, why aren't you touching the food?" The people shuddered. Yoon turned his trembling head toward the old man. He exuded such a monstrous aura that goosebumps ran down everyone's spine. What kind of monster was this? The girl with glasses grabbed the chief with trembling hands and asked the old man, "What should we do now?" The man just remained silent. Now it was clear that even he was a little worried. Looking at her, the man snorted, "Just ignore him and you'll be happy?" The old man continued, his mouth beginning to grow slightly. "Surely our dear guests will not show us disrespect. Pour them some wine immediately." The strangest people began to crowd around our heroes. The aura began to thicken with every passing second. A pig's head and apples was placed in front of our hero. Yoon thought to himself, "The dish looks luxurious, but why is everyone here so emaciated?" Two ghostly figures of girls began to hover around him. Their mouths were full of sharp teeth, and they began to offer food eagerly. Plates of food immediately appeared in front of the guy's face. The smell coming from them was not the most pleasant, and the poor guy shuddered. The ghosts began to offer food and drinks, and the players felt very uncomfortable, except for the bearded man, who just sat quietly. Two children with teeth as sharp as razors appeared near the old man and began shoving plates of food in his face. The old man could barely hold on. In the end, the poor old man couldn't resist and took the offered treats and tipped a small saucer of drink into his mouth. He looked at the children with crazy, frightened eyes. "See, Grandpa's finished," the old man smiled nervously. But then something incredible began to happen. His face changed, turning green, and his eyes filled with blood. The poor old man fell to the ground with a crash, knocking over the chair. Foam came out of his mouth. He grabbed his throat and began to wheeze. The ghosts surrounded him and began to laugh. Just one sip and he was already drunk. How was he going to make it to the end of the wedding? A girl immediately rushed to the old man and began to examine his dilated pupils and rapid breathing. He was definitely poisoned. And then Yoon finally realized what was wrong. All the food was probably poisoned. There were a lot of traps in this game. Now it was clear that he had a special mission. Meanwhile, the other participants just sat there. The man tried to ignore the annoying ghosts and even closed his eyes to do so. The girl with glasses clutched her head and was already crying from fear, but tried to hold on with grief in her heart. Seeing the old man, the girl approached the leader and grabbed him by the shoulder. "What should we do? We can't just leave him like that. We have to save him." In the end, the man couldn't take it anymore and pushed the poor girl away. "I told you to just sit there and ignore them. It's his own fault. Don't put yourself in danger." And then, as is customary in this genre, our hero stood up and said in a calm voice, "I'll help him. Don't worry." The boy was holding a purification pill, a small purple ball filled with medicinal herbs for healing. A smile spread across the boy's face. "So that's what those items from the beginner's store were for, and I must say, they are very useful." He quickly brought the glowing pill to the old man's mouth, and the light began to intensify. The poor old man was barely breathing. The other participants simply gathered around him. The smell of the pill turned out to be quite pleasant, like some kind of flower. Meanwhile, the old man was already on his last breath. Yoon approached him and was about to put the pill in his mouth. The bearded man watched what was happening with surprise and fear. Where did this guy get such a thing? He's just a beginner. Don't pay any attention to him. Yoon opened the mouth of the old man, who was barely breathing, and was about to put the pill in his mouth. A second later, the old man came to. His body began to twitch and a heavy sigh was heard. The girl with glasses was horrified. He could do it. Yoon took the old man by the arm and helped him up. The lucky man muttered something under his breath, some words of gratitude. As soon as our hero saved the old man, money began to pour in, and merit points began to accumulate. It turns out that the secret mission was to save the poisoned man. A smile appeared on the guy's face. "So, for this mission, I received even more merit points, but there was also some kind of notification. It turned out that in addition to the basic mission of survival, there was a whole chain of additional missions." Yoon began to think about how he could complete them. People continued to glance at each other, and our hero pondered where he could find these hidden missions. They must be hidden somewhere. Lowering his head, the guy thought, of course he wasn't lacking anything, but it wouldn't hurt to have it. It might help me. The other participants just glanced at him with some distrust. It seemed they had already begun to suspect something. By the way, where had the villagers gone? Indeed, looking around, the guys did not see those very ghosts. The hall was empty, as if no one had ever been there. Lifting a small plate, our hero said in a serious voice, "Maybe they just left while we were distracted by the old man. But we can't relax." The guy in the cap jumped up and ran quickly somewhere to the side. "We can't just sit here and wait. We have to do something." The man tried to stop him, but it was too late. He shouted something after him. "Stop acting like a madman. Stay where you are." However, the young man did not listen at all. He grabbed the door with his hands and tried to open it, but the entrance was locked. The man's heavy hand fell on his shoulder. His voice was heard, and the guy in the cap felt himself being pulled back. The man threw him away from the door. "I told you to stay where you are? Are you tired of living? Stop fooling around." The young man flew to the side and slid across the cold floor, nearly losing consciousness. And the man continued to rage, "Are you really so tired of your life? Stop putting yourself in danger." The frightened boy raised his head but did not dare to say anything in response. He just sighed heavily and looked ahead. Yoon intervened in the conversation and said that the man was probably right, that the locals were clearly hostile towards them and that they needed to be more careful. Finally, the man snapped, "There are no clues here. How do you know there are no traps on the street? What's the point of going out at all?" Raising his finger, Yoon said in a mysterious voice, "Do you know that we have an ally who can help us, so don't jump to conclusions?" The girl with white hair looked at him questioningly. "And who is this mysterious ally? Tell us." "It's the bride, the girl who was sitting in the locked house. She was dressed in bright red clothes that radiated energy." Pointing his finger at the wedding house, the guy said, "Since the marriage was with a ghost, the bride is also a kind of hostage. It's in her best interest to help us." The man snorted. "Who said the bride wasn't a ghost? All right, go ahead. If you're tired of living, I'll stay here." The guy in the cap finally got to his feet, dusted himself off, and said, "I have nothing to lose with you anyway." The girl with white hair also agreed, but thought to herself that this strange kid was definitely hiding something. He knew too much. The old man also wanted to join, but Yoon stopped him. "Listen, you need to stay here and rest a little. You've spent too much energy." Only the two of them remained, the girl with glasses and the angry man who was always yelling at everyone. The frightened girl leaned against the man and said she would stay with him. Yoon patted him on the shoulder and asked him to take care of these two. "If anything happens, call for help immediately." The man just gritted his teeth. In the end, the trio of brave souls headed for the exit to find at least some answers to their many questions. Quickly opening the door, Yoon entered first. There was the same red mist, only much thicker. The atmosphere here was heavy and it was difficult to breathe. Inside, there really was a princess sitting on a small throne, surrounded by strange people who looked more like dolls in red clothes. The guy in the cap was immediately terrified. These dolls looked very creepy. "What kind of place was this?" Yoon explained. "Of course they're ghosts. Otherwise the wedding wouldn't be called a ghost wedding. What's so hard to understand?" Coming closer, our hero spoke to the princess. He offered his help, introducing himself as a casual traveler. The bride ignored him. She just stared ahead with her lifeless eyes, her face hidden by a hood. Yoon approached and reached out his trembling hand to remove her hood, at least to see what was there. As it turned out, the bride was also a doll. Her face was completely white, as if painted. It turned out that she was not a human being at all. Surprised, Yoon took a few steps back. What was going on here? Where was the bride if there were only dolls here? The girl with white hair looked at him over her shoulder. He was a newcomer after all. Was he really so sure that the bride even existed? She suggested looking around the room to see if there was some kind of mechanism or something similar. Having said that, she immediately began to search the entire room for any clues, but it seemed that everything was empty. Searching the bed, the girl noticed that there was some kind of hidden lever, and her face immediately lit up with a smile. She turned and shouted, "I finally found it! The middle of the bed is empty. There seems to be a hatch or something like that here." Looking at her, Yoon thought to himself, she's not as simple as she seems. When the old man was poisoned, she was the first to figure out what was going on. She's smart and brave. The guy in the cap approached her and lifted her up in his arms. "Move over!" Yoon didn't have time to stop him when he heard a crash behind him. The bride doll fell to the floor with a crash and flew to the side. Now, all that remained was to move the bed. All three of them grabbed the left side of the bed and began to move it to the side. There really was a hatch under it, with a small wooden ladder leading down. Of course, it was questionable whether they should go down there. Overcoming his fear, Yoon said in a trembling voice, "Let's go down. There's no other option." In the end, all three of them climbed down through the hatch. There was a real dungeon there, and the air was damp and humid. They had several candles in their hands. Looking somewhere to the side, the girl said, "There seems to be only one road here. I think we should go that way." Without waiting long, the whole trio moved deeper into the dungeon, lighting their way only with these small candles. Suddenly, the guy in the cap stepped on something strange lying on the road and grimaced, looking to the side. What he saw shocked the poor guy. He crawled back, crying out in surprise. It was someone's hand. A girl with white hair came closer and picked up the hand. It was made of paper, just like those dolls. With an inquisitive gaze, she began to examine the area. There were about 6 more hands like it here. The guy stopped in front of them. There were several dismantled dolls, as if someone had broken them in an attempt to escape. The guy in the cap lit a candle and examined the limb, now without fear. But why were all the dolls destroyed? Suddenly, a strange thought came to our hero's mind. The boys felt a chill run down their spines. "I think these dolls remind me of someone. Wait a minute. They look like us." The whole group froze in front of the strange, dismantled dolls and didn't dare to move. In ancient times, there was a custom when a princess was accompanied by a dowry, which included not only jewelry and paintings. There were also people. Yes, you heard right. In the past, people were treated just like things. Finally, our hero understood everything, and here we are. The 6 of us, the dowry for this wedding. Now everything fell into place. The bride is not real. The room is also fake, not to mention the dowry. Now everything is clear. If the guesses are really correct, then the real room is downstairs, and these figures lying in front of us hint at the future. The other two just looked at the strange broken dolls with frightened eyes and didn't dare say anything. Okay, there's no time to think, let's go. Yoon, without waiting for the others, moved forward into the depths of the labyrinth. He had to act quickly. The others ran after him. They had to find the bride as soon as possible, otherwise the others would be in trouble, just like us. Seeing the light ahead, the guy in the cap pointed his finger forward. Look, something is glowing over there, let's hurry. Soon, the friends found themselves in a strange room flooded with green light. There was a heavy door there. With difficulty, Yoon opened it and peered through the crack with a frightened eye. Look, there really is a bride. Of course she's here, who would doubt it? The guys went inside, and there on the altar lay a body dressed in the same red dress. The bride's face was hidden, and she had her arms folded across her chest like a corpse. A strange energy emanated from her body. The girl with white hair pulled the veil off the bride's face, so she was still alive. She seemed to be breathing. They had to try to wake her up somehow. The guys approached the bride's body, although no one even understood how to help her. Turning around, Yoon called out to the guy in the cap. Listen, come closer. We need to lift her up and get her out of here somehow. The guys began to pull the lifeless body of the bride out of this dungeon with great care. Our hero was constantly worried. Listen, don't hit her. She's unconscious. Let's be careful. Finally, everyone climbed to the surface. Our hero sighed heavily. Okay, half the job seems to be done. Suddenly, the guy heard a strange pounding sound, as if several people were running towards them. He froze in place and looked ahead. An old man and the girl with glasses burst into the room, breathing heavily and shouting about something. It was clear that they were very frightened, but one could only guess what had happened on the surface. The old man and the girl shouted at each other to help them. Please save us, they said, their faces filled with pure terror. Looking at the frightened people, Yoon asked what had happened. Why are you so scared? The girl with glasses cried out in a trembling voice, the villagers want to get rid of us. The old man is trying to hold them back. And indeed, a real nightmare was unfolding on the street. That man was trying to restrain the crowd of angry ghosts in any way he could. Behind him stood another ghostly knight in armor. The man had somehow summoned him and was now trying to fight. But it seems that this only angered the villagers, and they jumped on the unfortunate man like a pack of wild animals. The ghostly knight began to destroy them one by one. The man was doing well so far, but there were more and more monsters. The ghostly servant was indeed strong. It was interesting to wonder what kind of power this was, perhaps some kind of special buff. But suddenly, the ghostly knight attacked his master and stabbed him in the back with his sword. The man cried out in surprise. Yoon looked closely. Indeed, the phantom had attacked his master, leaving a cut on his body. Perhaps this was the price for summoning his ally. A notification immediately appeared in front of the boy, and indeed, the servant was feeding on his master's pain. Now everything became clear. The others watched as the ghost warrior destroyed the monsters one by one, striking his master along the way. The girl with glasses looked at this man with admiration. What strength and endurance he had. In a serious voice, Yoon said that using such power was costly. This poor man would not last long, so he needed help. He grabbed the frightened old man by the shoulders. Listen, you searched the yard before coming in here. Did you find anything or not? With a trembling voice, the old man replied, Yes, I saw a small wall. It's not very high, you can climb over it. It's in the western part. Yoon immediately waved his hand and ordered everyone to move there. Run, I'll try to help this man. The residents, seeing that their prey was running away, immediately rushed to catch up. Don't let him go! Their voices sounded as if they were coming from under the ground. Those who managed to survive immediately ran to the western part of the courtyard, while the residents pursued them, crawling on the ground like real zombies. One of the monsters pounced on a girl with glasses. She was confused and froze in place, just staring at the monster approaching her. But luckily, help came close by. A girl with white hair swung her leg and kicked the monster right in the stomach, throwing it back. She noticed that another monster was approaching her from behind, swinging its arm. She would not have had time to react. But immediately grabbing its arm, the girl threw the monster over herself, hitting the ground with a dull crunch. Then, swinging her leg, she stabbed the monster between the legs with her sharp heel, and a cry was heard. You can guess what happened next. Looks like someone's having scrambled eggs for breakfast today. The guys just shrank back and looked at her, but she's pretty brutal, so you have to be careful with her. Approaching them, the blonde snorted, Stop standing there like statues. Do something for God's sake, or we'll just stand here forever. By the way, the bearded man returned, and now they stood together with our hero in defense against these monsters. The man looked at the others and said, Listen guys, I can't hold out any longer. This servant has only 3 strikes left. Think fast. Seeing that Yoon had taken out the talisman, the man looked at him with surprise. Where did this kid get such things? Taking out a strange piece of paper, our hero began to be covered with divine energy, summoning the three heavenly masters. He threw these strange pieces of paper right at the monsters. They were a kind of explosive seal. The seals began to crash into the ground in front of the monsters like meteorites, and several explosions were heard. Everything around was engulfed in flames that burned the monsters one by one, and a monstrous roar was heard all around. The monsters turned to ash, consumed by the holy flames, and their piercing screams could be heard everywhere. What tremendous power! A smile appeared on the man's face. Listen, kid, if you have more of these things, it's time to use them. Looking at the fire, Yoon said, this flame drives away the spirits of people. It won't touch you, that's clear. So don't be afraid. He looked at him sideways. Okay, what should we do now, genius? Yoon poked himself with his thumb. Let's stick to the original plan, shall we? Now, let's get out of here. He took a few big jumps and in an instant leaped over the wall. The man didn't even have time to say anything. The villagers, who were still monsters, walked around the neighborhood armed with pitchforks, looking for their prey. A hand appeared from the nearest haystack and quickly approached one of the monsters from behind. It was a blonde woman with that man. They grabbed several monsters by the neck and blocked their oxygen supply to knock them out. Looking around, the man hid the body of one of the disabled monsters right in the haystack so that no one would notice. In the end, the whole team ended up in a small house in relative safety, but there were more and more residents, so they had to get out of there as quickly as possible. The only question was where to run. The bride was nearby, still unconscious and lying on the knees of the girl with glasses. Our hero began to think hard. So we ruined the banquet, saved the bride, but the ceremony is still going on. We missed something. Suddenly, the bride began to sigh heavily and seemed to be coming to. Her weak voice could be heard. The girl with glasses looked at the others. Hey guys, I think the bride has come to. Maybe she can say something. The girl opened her eyes and looked ahead with a cloudy gaze, her lips trembling slightly. Yoon immediately jumped up to her and began to question the girl. Ma'am, do you remember your name? How did you end up here? Rising to her knees, the girl rubbed her head. My name is Lin. Who are you people? How did I end up here? It seems she didn't understand anything. You're just a bunch of losers. Yoon grinned and asked her, do you know anything about the ghost marriage, or do I have to tell you everything? Still holding her head, Lin muttered something under her breath. I was just kidnapped a few days ago. I don't remember anything else. She didn't know why they had taken her. Some strange people had wrecked their carriage and dragged her away with them. Smiling, Yoon said, Madame, nothing good will come of you staying here, so it's in your best interest to come with us. The guy sighed and asked in a tired voice, Tell me, you really don't remember anything? Any information will be valuable. The girl thought for a moment and began to look from side to side, trying desperately to remember something. Suddenly, she cried out, raising her finger. I remember something. These people were talking about something before they knocked me out. They were talking about some temple and how the path to it had to be cleared before the ceremony began. Our hero smiled and moved closer to her. So that means there's a statue of the goddess of the underworld in this temple, right? Getting to his feet, Yoon looked at the others. Guys, I have good news. I think I know how to put an end to this damn wedding. They moved towards the temple, which was nearby, with villagers armed with pitchforks walking nearby. At the sight of this terrifying spectacle, the guy in the cap turned pale. Are you completely out of your mind? This place is full of ghosts. But our hero winked. Don't worry, I have a trump card up my sleeve. He took a small scroll out of his pocket. It was a scroll of invisibility, but there was one catch. If you touched anyone, you would immediately reveal yourself, so be careful. After using the scroll, the guy started moving forward. He approached the gate and easily opened it. Everyone else followed him. We only have 3 sticks, so we need to hurry. Let's go faster or we're all done for. The whole group moved forward. They hid behind a tree when they suddenly saw one of the ghosts holding a torch in his hands, moving up the steps. The guy in the cap kept grumbling. They really can't see us, can they? Our hero just snorted. Shut up and let's move on. The friends moved up the steps, approaching the temple. There were several more ghosts on their way. Finally, with heavy hearts, they reached the entrance, above which hung a sign reading, Hall of Ancestors. Opening the door, the guys began to hurry inside the temple so that none of them would reveal themselves. When Yoon was the last to enter, he closed the door and exhaled heavily. Well, we're here. The blonde behind him pointed somewhere to the side. Listen, there's a path behind the main hall that leads to the top of the mountain. Turning around, Yoon hissed, let's go there immediately, but make sure no one reveals themselves. Suddenly, the guy froze in place and looked at a small altar on which lay a strange purple book with the words, Chronicles of the Ancients, written on it. Taking the book, our hero began to read it with interest. There were ancient writings, and the guy scanned the lines with his eyes. This book told about the 17th year of Emperor Long's reign, which happened several centuries ago. At that time, the earth was enveloped in torrential black rain, as if oil were falling from the sky. In the same year, the Great Famine began. Out of desperation and hunger, people began to devour each other. These were terrible times that are not usually remembered. Then our friends began to move forward along a small path that led to the top. Our hero reached out his hand to his bride. Hold on to me. It's quite high here. Watch your step. He turned to the girl and asked, by the way, do you know anything about the black rain mentioned in the chronicles? Lin lowered her head and became a little upset. No one can say for sure because it happened so long ago. And besides, there are many rumors about it. The emperor was very angry at the time and destroyed even the most worthy officials. It was then that the heavens opened and black rain fell on the earth, but usually no one believes this. The girl said she heard that exactly the same black rain fell in Guangzhou, but still. The guy in the cap immediately jumped up to her and started making faces. But you didn't expect the mountain to be overrun with ghosts, did you? The poor guy immediately received a heavy blow for that. Right in the forehead, he almost lost consciousness from such force. A blonde girl was already standing next to him with a steaming fist. The poor guy grabbed his head. Why are you doing this? I was just joking. Lifting his head, Yoon looked up at the temple. Apparently, it was this structure that protected people from the black rain. But on the other hand, all the people had already turned into monsters, so something didn't add up if you remembered the villagers. Suddenly, a bearded man stood in front of the others and shielded them with his body. Hold on, guys. The girl with glasses looked at him with frightened eyes and asked what was going on. The man's face was covered in sweat. With a trembling voice, he said, I think we're here. The temple towered above them like a huge black mountain. The gates were already open, and inside there was only pitch darkness. The whole team looked at each other, and there was genuine, unfeigned horror on the faces of all the participants in the game. Some kind of chanting could be heard coming from the temple, and a strange energy emanated from it. Everyone froze in place, waiting. Suddenly, the man turned to the others and shouted, Hurry up! We need to get out of here as soon as possible if you want to live. But it was already too late. A strange black figure in a long cloak appeared near the temple gates. The gates creaked open, and a strange man stood on the threshold. His voice could be heard. Well, since you dared to come here, your fate is already sealed. It was a crazy old man with a mad expression on his face. His eyes burned red and his smile was wider than that of a normal person. You will not return, he said. The man looked at this strange person in horror and cried out, summoning his ghostly servant. A knight immediately appeared behind him. There was no other option, and he didn't care that it would be very painful. The strange ghost grabbed the knight. What is this exorcism? Are you from the reincarnation sect? Did I understand correctly? The man had no idea what was going on and just wanted to destroy this monster, so he continued to attack. The sorcerer smiled even wider. Well, now everything is clear. It's a wild ghost. If I understand correctly, then I won't be polite. The man snapped his fingers and a clump of energy appeared in his hands. He raised his arm and prepared to attack. The ghostly knight soared into the air and began to move away from his master, turning into something shapeless. The others just looked at it in horror. Who was this man who, with a single stroke, was able to subdue the ghostly servant? He was clearly not so simple. The man clasped his head in his hands. He had lost the only trump card that could save their lives, and now they were in danger. The monster held a strange object in its clawed paws, which was pulling the ghost right into itself. The monster's smile spread even wider. It was a great rarity to get such a ghost. May the Mother of Spirits bless you. Completely exhausted, the man fell to his knees and lowered his head. He had already lost all hope of salvation. His strength was leaving him. Finally, the completely exhausted poor man fell face down on the ground with a loud thud. Then the terrible old man turned his eyes to the bride. Judging by your attire, the wedding is in full swing. His eyes flashed with rage. Lin shuddered under his gaze. The girl was terrified and fell to her knees, unable to move. She began to wave her arms and beg the terrible old man not to come near her. It was clear that she was scared out of her wits. The old man approached with calm steps. Look at her, white skin, bones like jade, an excellent specimen. He smiled at the bride. These fools had found an excellent match. His face was completely insane. The goddess of the underworld would be pleased. But suddenly our hero intervened in the conversation. Why would the mother of ghosts need this girl? The monstrous old man turned his eyes on him. How dare you interrupt me, you little scoundrel? Are you tired of living? Yoon understood that being afraid was not the best idea right now. He just needed to stall for time somehow. He pointed at himself and smiled. Listen, but we don't have much time left as the bride's escorts, right? The old man's heavy hand immediately fell on the boy's shoulder. How interesting. You're wearing strange clothes, I must say. The monster came closer. You still dare to argue with me knowing that your days are numbered? How bold of you, young man. Who are you anyway? Yoon forced a smile. I'm just an ordinary traveler. According to tradition, we don't know the reason for our demise, but afterwards we become wandering spirits. That's why I dared to ask. The old man smiled, and a ghostly fire appeared in his hands. So you don't want to become a spirit, you want to know more. Our hero glanced over his shoulder at the other participants, signaling that they should not make any sudden movements. The old man suddenly laughed. All right, I'm in a good mood today, so I'll tell you. Of course, you're right about the mother of ghosts not giving up on this marriage. You are absolutely right about that. The fact is that the bride is marrying Vajrasadhu, that's the reason. He looked at the other participants. As for you, you are just part of the sacrifice, that's all. The old man waved his hand. Don't worry, I'll make sure that not even the slightest wandering spirit remains of you. He waved his hand, and hundreds of ghosts moved straight towards the guys, opening their hungry mouths. A cry from many voices was heard. All the participants in the ceremony found themselves locked in some kind of ghostly cage, with blue energy spreading everywhere. The old man just looked at them and smirked. Apparently, he was pleased with the effect he had created and was eager for the wedding to end. But suddenly, a strange flash of yellow light appeared behind him. The old man looked up to see what it was. Behind the players, a huge ghostly tiger appeared, gathering speed and moving straight towards the old man, who didn't understand what was happening. It turned out that Yoon had bought the amulet after all, and now was the time to use it. The guy was approaching the monster. The guy in the cap crawled back and shouted in a trembling voice, "I thought I was done for. You saved my life again. I'll be indebted to you until the day I die." In our hero's hands was a white tiger figurine that restored his spiritual strength almost completely. Turning to the others, Yoon shouted quickly, "Get out of here! Blocking one attack will require a lot of energy. I'll try to buy some time." The stunned blonde looked at him with surprised eyes and seemed to freeze in place. But in the end, she agreed and waved her hand. "Okay guys, let's get out of here. Let's not interfere with him. If you want to live." The old man was shocked. Where did this boy get such amulets? They're middle class. I didn't sense any power from him at all. Finally, getting to his feet, the demon asked, "Who are you really, kid? You're definitely hiding something." Spreading his arms, Yoon smiled kindly. "I told you, I'm just a wanderer. Let's continue our pleasant conversation and not fight." The old man lost his temper. "How dare you talk to me like that, you insolent brat? You're just a petty rat." Swinging his staff, the old man sent dozens of ghosts straight at the boy, intending to destroy him. Our hero just stood in front of him and waited, knowing that the battle would be very difficult. An energy shield appeared around the boy, and the tiger behind him roared, reflecting the old man's attacks. A monstrous rumble was heard. The demon bowed his head. His eyes glowed in the darkness. "You are foolish to rely on your strength, very foolish." The tiger looked at the monster with furious eyes. The demon continued, "When you exhaust your energy, I will destroy you with a single blow." All hell broke loose around them. The ground began to shake beneath their feet. Yoon tried to escape the blow somehow. The demon rejoiced. "Well, what's the matter, kid? You're not as quick as you were last time." Stopping, Yoon caught his breath. "It's bad if I keep running away and don't take the initiative. It won't end well." The guy waved his hand and ordered the white tiger to move forward and attack at last. The white tiger leaped forward and began to approach the monster with long strides, opening its wide mouth. Its huge paw flew over the old man, and in another second, there would have been no trace of the demon left. However, the old man managed to use the barrier in time. He laughed and looked at the boy. "Do you think these children's toys can defeat me?" He stretched out his clawed paw covered with energy. "After your death, I will take your soul. I will use ghost fire and vengeful spirits. You will experience incredible suffering." The old man's face broke into a smile. Now he was completely insane. Suddenly, explosions were heard. The blonde girl threw several explosive scrolls directly at the old man to confuse him. The girl stood clutching several pieces of paper in her hands and staring fiercely ahead. It seemed she was not afraid of anything. The demon looked at her and smiled. "You want to die too? How brave. But you're just a gnat." But suddenly, his own shield cracked, and the old man heard a strange sound behind him. His entire energy shield began to crack. The demon was frightened and stepped back. What was happening? Seizing the moment, Yoon shouted, "Come on, let's do this. We only have one chance." Swinging her arm, the blonde launched several more explosive scrolls directly at the old man, and a monstrous roar was heard. When the dust settled, our hero looked at the demon. "It seems your spiritual energy was depleted much earlier, old man." The demon looked ahead with crazy eyes and shouted, "That's impossible, it can't be, because the statue is still intact." Raising his finger, the guy smiled. "You're right. As long as the statue is intact, spiritual energy cannot be depleted. That's right, isn't it?" The demon looked at him with surprised eyes and took a few steps back. Now he no longer looked so confident in his victory. But here's the catch. In the 12th year of the emperor's reign, a flood washed away the statue, and its location remained unknown. The locals tried to find it, of course, but to no avail. It was lost forever under a layer of silt and mud. The search lasted several months, and people were exhausted. They even had to use the army, but it was all in vain. But after the statue returned, a great famine struck the inhabitants, and they could not cope with it. The boy was holding the book and reading it with interest. It turns out that the only punishment was whipping, right? Closing the book, Yoon smiled, because in the past, people were simply killed. Those were difficult times. It turned out that at that time, the same old man, having overcome his monstrous fear, stole the statue of the Mother of Spirits from its place. The demon flew into a rage. "You little rat! How dare you act behind my back? He jumped up and ran after the old man to take the statue away. He couldn't let that happen. But then Yoon appeared in front of him with his tiger. "Where are you going, old man? Do you really think I'll just let you do this?" Finally, the demon understood everything. He pointed his finger at the boy. "So, you've been trying to distract me all this time, you little brat?" A smile appeared on our hero's face. "That's right. You understood everything correctly. We planned everything from the very beginning." Shaking his head, the boy said angrily, "You shouldn't keep diaries where you write down everything that happens. It's stupid, isn't it? You gave me the hint yourself." The book fell right at the feet of the demon, who stood frozen, staring ahead, unable to believe what he was seeing. The others also came closer. The guy in the cap cracked his knuckles and said with pleasure, "How long I've waited for this." The statue of the ghostly mother stood before him. It was a small stone sculpture of a woman with her hands folded in some kind of magical gesture. Approaching the statue, Yoon touched it with his fingers and looked around. Lights were already beginning to glow nearby. The mission was complete. The old man stood covering the statue with his hand, still unable to believe that it was really true that they had managed to survive. Yoon jumped up to him and helped him up. "Yes, it's true, old man. You saw the message yourself. Everything worked out." The two of them looked at the girl in glasses who was standing a few steps away, shaking with fear. Suddenly, the girl raised her head and screamed loudly, apparently too overwhelmed to control her emotions. Putting his hands in his pockets, the guy in the cap approached her. "Why are you crying? Everyone is alive, no one is hurt, everything is fine, it's nonsense." The blonde girl approached the girl and wrapped her arms around her to shield her from this madman. He was up to something again. As expected, the madman raised his hands and began to walk out like a ghost to scare the poor girl. Okay, screw him. The only question is what to do with the one who is still unconscious. And indeed, the bearded man was still lying face down. Yoon asked how he was feeling, and the blonde replied that his vital signs seemed to be normal. He had just lost consciousness. Exhaling, our hero forced a smile. "Okay, the game is over. We survived. Congratulations." The bride was walking around nearby, looking at everything with a surprised look. "Okay, I don't know how long we'll be here, but we have to hold on." Raising her finger, the blonde said, "The estimated time is 5 to 15 minutes, then we will be teleported to the starting zone." Hearing this, Yoon looked at her with a slightly incredulous look over his shoulder, and the girl just snorted. In the end, our hero decided to ask the question. "Listen, how do you know all this?" The blonde smiled, which he didn't expect. "You're not the only one with secrets." They were distracted from their conversation and looked at the bride, who was standing nearby, staring into the nearby bushes. Coming closer, the blonde asked, "Do you have a plan for what you're going to do next?" Lin shuddered in surprise. Looking at her with slightly frightened eyes, Lin cried out in surprise, "Are you really leaving?" The blonde took a few steps closer and looked at the girl with a searching gaze. Suddenly, they both flinched because they heard a strange sound behind them, like a rumbling and hissing. Several horsemen began to approach them from the darkness of the night. They looked like clay statues riding horses. But in reality, they were people. Several soldiers dressed in ancient uniforms who stopped in front of them, their horses rearing up. The whole team froze in place, ready to fight back. Could it be that the enemy was coming again? Their strength was already running out. Yoon was already prepared and crouched down, but his bride suddenly said, "Please spare them. They are my family." The girl came closer, her voice now sounding more firm. "You have come by order of the emperor to take me away. I am fine." The commander knelt before the young lady and greeted the princess. The man's name was Wei, and he was the commander of the cavalry. Looking at this strange scene, our hero just snorted. It seemed that nothing could surprise him now. The guy's hand began to be covered with interference, just like last time. He smiled. "Well, it seems there is no need to worry about what will happen to it." Noticing that his body was undergoing some kind of metamorphosis again, our hero looked in horror at his hand, which was beginning to dissolve into thin air. The blonde looked at the frightened bride and said, "I think it's time for us to say goodbye. Our paths are diverging," and dissolved into thin air. Our heroes began to teleport away, leaving the disheartened bride with the guards in their strange world. The soldier just snorted at them. There was no trace of them left. "Madame, who are these people?" Lin said. She didn't even have time to find out their names. What a pity. In the end, our hero found himself in a strange space. The store was still open, and there was time to explore it thoroughly before the next task. Yoon was a little upset. The reward for completing the mission was too small, not even enough to cover the costs of the mission. What a pity. He remembered the man's words before the battle began. If you only complete the main tasks, you can only save up for one item. The boy thought about it and now understood why the man hadn't intervened. He simply didn't want to spend his points. Waving his hand, Yoon smiled. "Okay, I shouldn't worry about it. There are more items in the store. There won't be enough." In the end, our hero returned to the real world. The teleportation happened quickly, and now he was standing in his familiar room. Quickly examining his body, the guy realized that he had returned to where he came from and seemed to be safe and sound, which was good. But only a few minutes had passed in the real world. Suddenly, the poor guy grabbed his head, which began to split with pain. God, what's going on again? Finally, exhausted, he plopped down on the bed next to him. Okay, I need to get some sleep. I'll figure out the rest tomorrow. His eyes opened only when bright rays of sunlight fell on his face. Yoon sighed heavily and finally came to his senses. On shaky legs, he tried to stand up. His body still ached, and he felt as if he hadn't rested at all. It was still too early when a knock on the door woke him up. Who on earth was coming at such an early hour? Couldn't they sleep? Still sleepy, the guy moved down the hallway, almost instinctively, as the knocking on the door continued insistently. It turned out that the blonde girl was standing on the threshold. She introduced herself. It turned out that she represented the Human Security Bureau and asked for his cooperation. His sleepiness vanished, and Yoon suddenly understood everything. So you didn't just show up there by chance? Where did the organization get my address? The girl continued in a calm voice. Original Sin chooses people at random. Our meeting was just a coincidence, nothing more. Behind the girl stood a Special Forces soldier holding a loaded automatic weapon, ready to take action at any moment. Yoon sensed that something was not right and shuddered with fear. Listen, is this case you mentioned somehow connected with kidnapping people? The blonde snorted. What nonsense. As long as you cooperate with us, we will ensure your safety and nothing will threaten you. Yoon's trembling finger pointed to the machine gun peeking out from around the corner. Then how do you explain what an armed soldier is doing there? The blonde leaned close to him, her voice firm. I repeat, as long as you cooperate with us, we will not threaten your personal safety. With a snap of his fingers, the soldier took the safety off his rifle, making it clear that it was better not to joke around and to agree immediately. Covered in cold sweat, Yoon immediately raised his hands. Okay, you've convinced me. I'll cooperate with you, but let's do this without that. Just give me time to change clothes. Looking at her wristwatch, the girl snorted, We're leaving in 15 minutes. If you make it in time, you're lucky. A few minutes later, the guy appeared near the car. It was a small SUV, and the blonde was already sitting behind the wheel. She looked at him with a lifeless gaze and ordered him in a cold tone to get in the car. The car sped off, and soon they were flying down the road, accompanied by 2 other SUVs. Yesterday's mission had been the most difficult one yet. Sitting behind the wheel, the girl finally relaxed a little. We survived only thanks to you. I am truly grateful. But the organization didn't find you yesterday. To be more precise, only someone at my level can reveal your qualifications. She pressed the gas pedal, and the car roared as it accelerated, releasing clouds of smoke from under its wheels. Soon they stopped near the Human Life Safety Department, which was a tall building more like a palace. The SUVs stopped near the parking lot, and several security guards rushed over to them. A man in military uniform leaned over and demanded clearance. The blonde rolled down the window and handed him a small piece of paper. After scanning it with a sensor, the soldier nodded his head, indicating that everything was in order and they could proceed. Welcome to headquarters. The concrete barrier disappeared, and the cars drove freely into the large building. Soon they were sitting in a small office at a square table. The guy asked, Why did you bring me here? She just snorted, You'll find out soon enough. The door opened and none other than Uncle Bai appeared in the doorway. He greeted the boy. Yoon jumped up from his seat. What are you doing here? The boy's face showed a pure, genuine shock. He knew this uncle as an ordinary security guard. What kind of joke was this? But now Bai looked completely different. He was wearing a professor's robe. Apparently, he was not just a security guard. It turned out that this man was a famous folklorist and historian. Seeing the confusion on the young man's face, the professor laughed. I'm just like you, a player. I do research and excavations. What's so strange about that? The blonde leaned over and explained that this man was one of the most important members of our organization and also the honorary deputy director. The old man waved his hand dismissively. Don't exaggerate. If it weren't for the disappearance of my predecessor, I wouldn't have gotten this position. Hearing the name of one of his parents, the young man jumped up. Did they also work in this bureau? The old man just smiled good-naturedly and became somewhat sad. It seems you really don't know anything. The fact is that your parents are considered the founders of this bureau, so to speak, the old-timers. They were the first to discover the anomaly. The professor sighed and lowered his eyes, but unfortunately, heaven always takes the best. I'm very sorry, kid. Yoon grabbed his shoulders. So it turns out my parents are alive and there was no car accident. What happened to them? The professor paused for a moment, looking at the blonde woman as if asking her permission to talk about it. The girl immediately jumped up and interrupted the old man. You have no right to talk about this. It's classified information. Hearing this, our hero began to get angry. Why can't I find out about my parents? What kind of joke is this? Handing him a small folder, the blonde said that in order to find out, he would have to sign an agreement and become a member of the organization. Only now did Yoon realize that some girl was trying to trick him. He looked at the folder she held out to him with suspicion. Immediately, images of huge monsters attacking the city appeared before his eyes. Frightened residents trying to save their lives. Would he really have to become part of this nightmare? As if to confirm his words, the blonde continued, Yes, you're right. If you sign, you'll become part of the battle. Rereading the agreement, Yoon said in a trembling voice, "It says here that you don't send people on missions from which they cannot return." The serious-looking girl said, "Yes, we don't send people and sacrifice them just like that," but then she fell meaningfully silent. "There is only one exception. If the sacrifice is worthwhile and helps save more lives, then we will make an exception." Yoon immediately signed the document. "All right, then, I will definitely find out the whole truth no matter what it costs me." Several people sitting in a large office were already watching them through the camera. Someone's voice was heard. "So, what do you think about this guy?" A man in military uniform with a scar on his face snorted. "He's arrogant, cocky, and too quick-tempered," his colleague said. Another man smiled. "Isn't that cool? We haven't had such lively employees in a long time. By the way, why is it so dark in here?" He turned around, walked over to the light switch, and clicked the button. The lights came on in the room. The soldier frowned and gritted his teeth. "I am responsible for doubt, and you are responsible for faith. Everyone has different responsibilities, don't forget." The professor said he has a few more projects, and Ching will take care of your training. As a result, the door slammed behind the old man, and our hero was left alone with the girl in an empty room, feeling that he had been deceived. They sat down at the table opposite each other, and an awkward pause ensued, with neither of them daring to speak first. Finally, overcoming his nervousness, Yoon opened his mouth to say something, but only stammered. The girl interrupted him, moved closer, and introduced herself, saying that she was the former head of a special analytical group at the Human Security Bureau. They shook hands, and the guy didn't even understand how it happened. He hesitated and scratched the back of his head, clearly not knowing how to continue the conversation. Or perhaps he was just very shy. It turned out that this girl already knew everything about him: his name, age, and even the fact that he was currently unemployed. They started taking pictures of our hero for the record, and so you, the son of the founder of the organization, dropped out of your university. And there is also a suspicion of non-traditional orientation. After this phrase, Yoon couldn't take it anymore and literally tore up the poster, shouting that everything was fine with her. After calming down, he sat back down. Ching continued in a calm voice. "As you already understand, we know a lot about our bureau, and we have a couple of questions for you." She folded her arms across her chest. "We are, so to speak, an official organization investigating all unusual incidents, including the game Original Sin. It seems that our hero has already gotten used to his role as an employee, and, folding his arms in front of him, he asked, 'So there are other incidents?' 'Yes.' In response, Ching simply handed him a folder. 'There are even more than you think. Take a look and see for yourself. I think you'll like it.' Taking out a small piece of paper, our hero began to study the dates. As it turned out, the incidents occurred as far back as the Middle Ages. Previously, anomalies appeared directly from the cave in the form of flames. Now, we cannot allow this to happen again, you understand? But now, the monsters from the cave have crawled out, and one of them is connected to primal rage. That's what I'm getting at." Continuing to read, Yoon asked, "So with the appearance of the game, the other anomalies disappeared?" The girl shook her head. "Not exactly. They turned into their own little worlds." She raised her finger. "The anomaly now works like a black hole, sucking in everything in its immediate vicinity." She got up and took a few steps toward the wall, where there was a small button. Our hero turned to her. King continued, "Right now, the main task of our organization is to fight anomalies like this. That's what I'm talking about." She pressed the button. Behind the girl, a small board appeared. Yoon looked at it and raised his eyebrow in surprise. "What is this?" Without answering, she began to write. And here is the first derivative. The players, that is, you and I, the people who got into the game. By the way, these players are out of control, which is the first problem we will face. The thing is, people who accidentally gain this power start doing evil things and feel like they can do whatever they want, like they're God. As you understand, our organization is engaged in capturing and restraining such individuals so that they do not harm society. Finally, looking up from the sheet, Yoon asked with interest, "What is the second problem then?" Continue writing. King wrote another word, dungeons. "So there you have the second problem. They also appear randomly." Leaning toward the guy, Ching continued, "And here's another thing. The term doesn't refer to the dungeons of our missions in the game. Rather, it refers to those that have appeared in our real world. Yes, those exist too. Don't be surprised." After these words, Yoon froze for a second and put the crumpled piece of paper on the table. "So you mean they will appear in our world?" Straightening up, Ching became serious. "Remember what the assignment said about failure having serious consequences?" Finally, it began to dawn on him that in case of failure, the dungeon would break out and then there would be many more victims. King began to explain that there was a second type of task we had to deal with, preventing the dungeon from appearing in the real world. This information was too difficult to comprehend, and our hero began to think hard, but why didn't he know about this before? As if sensing his question, the blonde brought a small suitcase. "Don't worry, the chance of the mission failing is very small. There are veterans involved. And here is your starter kit." The suitcase opened, revealing a pistol with several magazines, a lighter, and some kind of notebook. At the sight of the weapon, The guy's eyes widened in surprise. Is this going to be my equipment? There was a click. Ching deftly loaded the pistol magazine and pulled the trigger. The girl took aim. Don't worry, I have a license. I'll explain how to use this thing later. You've never even fired a gun before. She threw the pistol to Yuna. The guy didn't immediately understand what to do and almost dropped it on the ground. Looking at this mess, Ching just sighed heavily. It's not given out just like that, only to trusted people. You understand what I'm getting at. Yoon held the gun with trembling hands, and the blonde continued. If you exceed your authority, we'll get rid of you. You will also have a satellite phone and a watch with a special detector built into it. When an anomaly is detected, it will give a signal. There are only a few colors of anomalies, the safest of which is green, so there's no need to be afraid. Next are red, blue, purple, and white, in ascending order of danger. The lower the scale, the more dangerous the situation. Their conversation was interrupted by an insistent knock on the door. Surprised, Yoon flinched and looked behind him. The door opened, and the stern-looking soldier with a scar on his face appeared in the doorway. He did not rush to enter. Looking at him, the blonde raised her eyebrow in surprise. Deputy, why are you here? The man named Shu entered without invitation and asked in a stern voice, how much longer will the training last? It was clear that he was dissatisfied. Also a little angry, Ching replied, the theory has almost been studied. All that remains is to go to the shooting range and teach him how to shoot. The soldier took out a stack of papers. That can wait. We have an urgent task, please read this. He handed out the papers to those present, and the guys began to study the meaning of the assignment. The sheet read, Commission, Hut in the Forest. Mission type, Uncontrolled. Dungeon, Danger level, Night rank. What's the matter? Ching slammed her hands on the table. He's only just finished his first mission. What are you thinking? But the soldier was adamant. No, you either accept the mission or reject it. The man looked at the guy sitting next to him. With a trembling voice, Yoon said he wanted to know the consequences of refusing. Zhu sighed. Nothing special, really. They'll just erase your memory, you won't remember anything, and they'll send you back to where you came from. That was too much, our hero thought. What about the entrance test, the demonstration of strength and all that? Okay, to hell with it all. Without asking any more questions, the guy decided to accept the assignment after all. There was no other choice. The boss went about his business, leaving the two alone. And again, an awkward silence hung in the air. Yoon was the first to break the silence. He raised an eyebrow. Listen, is it just me? Or does the boss dislike me a little? Looking at him sternly, the blonde said, we don't usually hire people who have only completed one mission. They're still too unstable. But as you can see, we made an exception for you. We studied your file. And besides, the way you completed your first mission was impressive. They say that Mr. Bai and all the other members of the Bureau spent the whole night compiling your file. The guy tapped his fingers on the table. Apparently, he was still very nervous. Well, at least now I understand a little better. Yoon smiled. So I got here purely through connections and became something like, in response, the blonde just raised an eyebrow. You think too much, and that's harmful. My duty is simply to complete the mission. She showed him the earpiece in her ear and ordered him to put on one just like it. The intelligence team will contact you and fill you in on the details. Stretching, Yoon said as if on purpose, but you don't send people on obviously dangerous missions, do you? This made the blonde furious. She didn't answer, but simply walked past. Our hero was forced to agree. Okay, your deputy is a reasonable person after all. King left the office, closing the door behind her, apparently making it clear that the conversation was over. Finally, they went outside, where an SUV was already waiting. The blonde was the first to get behind the wheel. Yoon still seemed to be hesitating. From the window, she shouted for the guy to get in the car and stop dawdling around, because they had a mission to accomplish. And for God's sake, the girl touched her earpiece with her finger and requested additional information. A voice came from this headset. Connecting to the state network, connecting to the intelligence department, assistant chair on the line. This assistant turned out to be a girl sitting in the command center. Her name was Yuen, and she was surrounded by a multitude of monitors with lines of code running across them. The guys were already sitting in the car, and the methodical voice of the scout reporting information could be heard through the headphones. The intelligence officer continued to report that at the moment the group consisted of 3 people, and that was all the information about the incident with the hut in the forest. Were there any questions? The blonde nodded her head. No, we can proceed with the mission. She grabbed the steering wheel and pressed the gas pedal. It seems that our hero began to understand that the mission commander would be a veteran, similar to your commander who was just testing me. Lee, as it turned out, was not the most beloved member of the Bureau, so don't expect too much from him. The blonde hissed her last words through clenched teeth, as if out of irritation. Yoon looked at her and asked, why? The girl just sighed heavily in response. Okay, you'll find out when you see him in person, believe me, I'm not lying. The car began to pick up speed and was already racing down the highway, leaving clouds of smoke behind its wheels. When they met the veteran, He was in a rather unpleasant state. The man was sitting with his arms wrapped around a bucket, vomiting frantically. Seeing this, Yoon covered his nose with his hands. This is called a veteran. Lee was lying somewhere nearby, moaning. As it turned out, this man was an experienced player, but he was also a pathological alcoholic and a complete slacker. King sighed heavily for the 100th time. Now you finally understand why I said he couldn't be relied on. Yes. Behind our guys stood a squad of soldiers. Ching demanded that they give her a bucket of ice water. The soldiers immediately began to carry out the order. Poor Lee didn't even have time to recover before cold water was splashed in his face. The man didn't even quite understand what had happened. He immediately jumped up and began to look around with frightened eyes, wondering what had happened. Could it be that it had started to rain? Looking at him with obvious disgust, Ching said, "Wake up, drunkard. We're here on a mission, by the way." Raising his sleepy eyes, Lee said with difficulty, "I recognize that voice, Bluebird, yes." He immediately leaned back and lay down carelessly on the ground as if he were at a resort. The man immediately turned away. "I must be dreaming because I saw a blue bird. What a joy." Annoyed, the blonde began to massage his nose. "For God's sake, wake him up. If necessary, pour all the water on him and get him out of here. For God's sake." Turning around, she ordered one of the soldiers to follow her to the scene of the incident. The man holding the bucket in his hands saluted. Approaching her from behind, Yoon decided to ask, "Listen, he called you a bluebird, but why?" The blonde explained that it turned out to be her code name from her previous job, just like the killer whales. It turns out that she used to be a captain. One of the soldiers pointed somewhere in the direction of the scene of the incident. Soon, the squad approached a large house that looked like an old mansion, from which emanated a monstrous energy that filled the entire space. Our hero also felt it and raised his head. It was a real darkness and imbalance that simply could not exist in reality. It was like a puzzle or mosaic in which an inappropriate fragment had been squeezed in, namely this dungeon. The watch on his wrist began to beep frantically and glow, indicating that they were near the center of the anomaly. Raising his hand, Yoon looked at the beeping indicator. Maybe this meant that someone had escaped from the anomaly. Snorting under her breath, the blonde said, "This distortion is called everyone put on protective suits. Determine our location." The soldiers began to change into protective suits that looked more like spacesuits. Ching helped them, while our hero just stood and watched. Looking at her partner, Ching said, "We don't need these suits. I wanted to train you after the shooting, but you'll figure it all out on your own." Here's a quick overview. Anomaly is a general term for all kinds of supernatural monsters, terrain, rules, and so on. And distortion is an appendage, something like a virus or radiation. Have you heard of it or not? They infect ordinary people, which is why we need suits. That didn't make it any clearer. Yoon began to think hard. So if anomalies infect ordinary people, why aren't we wearing suits? Finally, it began to dawn on him. The guy raised his head. "It turns out we don't need suits because my players are right." The blonde nodded. "You're right. We've been distorted for a long time. As you can see, we're fine, so don't worry." Scene, it's getting serious. The scale is increasing with every second. How much time will it take to mobilize resources as quickly as possible? Report. Sitting at the computer, the scout realized it was already too late. There were no employees left in the city, only a village a short distance away. Thinking it over, the blonde ordered to prioritize and then submit a request for support immediately. Yoon approached her from behind and, with the air of a hero, said that he thought he could save the situation. "Just trust me." King folded her arms across her chest. "Listen, this is no joke. The hut in the forest is a powerful anomaly. Don't treat it so lightly. Besides, our goal is only to investigate and evacuate if the danger is too great, so we must act together." The girl stepped forward and jerked the door open. "Don't split up. Follow me." Suddenly, something caught her attention. Ching turned her head to the side and looked into the depths of the hut with frightened eyes. Only darkness was visible in the distance. Yoon supported Lee by the arms and also went inside. The veteran was still moaning from a hangover, but he immediately came to his senses as soon as he saw the scale of the problem. His face was still red, but his eyes already expressed concern. Yoon picked up the headset and reported that one of the group members had just disappeared before their eyes. "What the hell is going on here?" Sitting at the computer, Yuan shouted that one of your positions is lost. "I can't contact her. I repeat, I don't know where she is." Looking at the satellite phone, Yoon cursed. The satellite connection wasn't working either. There were no clues as to how to find her. Suddenly, Lee began to speak, but only one phrase came out of his mouth: "When we were on Earth." He stepped back and continued speaking. "It's obvious that our friend has simply been transported to another dimension. It's clear why we can't contact her." The man took out another bottle of alcohol from somewhere and began to drink greedily. "Orca, you were talking about problems with reality. Well, here's a joke for you. It turns out that the first group encountered a so-called spatial fold, where the length of the corridor exceeds the actual length of the building. But there had never been such cases before. The guys stood at the entrance, unable to decide whether to go inside. Looking at our hero, Lee smiled ironically. "It's nasty, isn't it? Don't you think about giving up?" After gathering his thoughts, Yoon exhaled. It was clear from his expression that he was not going to back down and intended to move forward. The guy raised his head and asked for a minute to think things over. The situation was lousy, no doubt about it. It was time to use his trump card. The guy asked the system to open the reward exchange store. Various tabs with items immediately began to spin in front of him. Now he had to choose something suitable. Meanwhile, in another space, Ching tried unsuccessfully to get in touch, but only hissing and interference came from the phone. The girl looked back. It turned out that she had to get out of there on her own. There was no help to be expected. The situation was bad, to say the least. She lunged forward and slipped through the exit, hoping that at least this way she would be able to get out of this closed circle. But her face immediately changed when Ching saw that she had not managed to escape. The space remained unchanged. Somehow, she found herself in the same mansion, even though she had passed through the exit a second ago. Finally, it dawned on her that this was a spatial fold, and the girl began to turn her head in search of an exit. She tried to go through the door again, but the result was the same. No matter how hard the poor girl tried to get out of there, she ended up in the same place. In the end, Ching gave up her futile attempts and stopped in the middle of the mansion, looking around with an angry gaze. The poor girl grabbed her head. No matter where she went, she always ended up back where she started. What kind of curse was this? Turning her head, she looked deep into the mansion. Well, if she couldn't get out of here, she would have to continue her investigation inside. On the other hand, the two guys still couldn't bring themselves to go inside. Lee smiled and looked at his partner. "Well, kid, are you still going to go inside?" Without the slightest hesitation, Yoon nodded his head. "Of course I'm going in. I'm not leaving anyone here," and he moved forward. They moved deeper into the mansion, almost parallel to their friend. There was no other choice anyway. Grabbing his headset, Yoon asked Kasaka Muredo for information about the key to unlocking the dungeon. Sitting at the monitor, the programmer girl said that at the moment, the group had received some clues. This mansion is run by a family of 3. Some members of the group got a spiritual message and saw their life picture. Here is the second clue. Each statue contains human remains, which indicates a large number of people who were destroyed. And finally, the third clue. The rest of the group encountered the enemy, the ghost assassin, who is immune to firearms. The guy himself finally understood. Now everything is clear. This monster is the core of the mutation. Well, that clarifies the situation. A ghostly figure of a girl suddenly appeared behind the guys, and her faint voice rang out, "You finally come here." The trembling guys slowly turned their heads toward the voice. It was clear from their faces that they were scared out of their wits. Before their eyes stood the ghostly figure of a blue-colored girl, her body glowing with burning eyes. The ghost looked at them. Frightened, the boys jumped back in different directions. The ghost did not move from its place, but simply stared at them with lifeless eyes. Turning its head, the ghostly figure approached Uni, almost touching him, and the boy felt its icy breath on his skin. Turning around, the ghost girl literally flew into the depths of the mansion, inviting the others to follow her. Lee, who was standing nearby, asked his partner, "What do we do now?" Yoon replied without hesitation, "We follow her. What's so hard to understand?" After walking a little way into the mansion, the guys stopped behind a wall and began to watch the ghost from a distance. Looking at his partner, Yoon said irritably, "You're a Taoist monk, so this is your specialty." In response, Lee just stared at him in surprise. But after a few seconds, pointing his finger upward, the man said, "There are no ghosts in this world. I am a convinced materialist." Pointing his finger at the ghost girl who had almost disappeared into the painting, Yoon grinned. "So tell her that." Approaching the painting, Lee said calmly, "It's an anomaly. The fact that she appeared as a ghost is just one aspect of it." The programmer's incoherent speech came through the earpiece. It turned out that it is currently believed that people's thoughts influence the creation of these anomalies. Scratching the back of his head, Yoon asked irritably, "So what's the difference? I don't understand." Raising his finger, Lee began to explain with an important look on his face. "Well, let's say it's as if a person was struck by lightning. In ancient times, people believed that he was crippled for his bad deeds or something like that. Nowadays, it is believed that it happened because the person was standing under a tree during a thunderstorm. It's simple." He took a few sips of alcohol again. "Well, that's the difference. The first is superstition, and the second is pure science proven in practice." Approaching the painting, Yoon looked at it thoughtfully. "So what do you think she wanted to tell us with her actions?" The painting depicted a boy in a school uniform with a backpack on his back, looking at a girl leaning out of a window. Suddenly, the ghost reappeared, this time from another painting. Lee pointed his finger and said, "Quick, let's go there. See, she's over there." Without saying a word, the boys moved on to the next painting. The ghost had already managed to hide inside the house. This painting depicted the same girl hiding around the corner, and in the distance, a man was raising a huge hammer over a poor guy. Exchanging glances, Yoon finally understood. That's what she's trying to warn us about, to be careful and protect our father. The guys had barely finished their thoughts when they heard heavy footsteps behind them. A strange figure, resembling a statue, was approaching them from behind. It was a statue resembling an antique one, so in ancient Greece, the statue's eyes burned with red fire like lanterns. The guys froze in their places, and the huge monster was already swinging a heavy stone axe over their heads. At the last moment, the guys managed to jump back, and a heavy blow was heard as the axe fell straight to the floor, leaving large cracks. Jumping aside, our hero, armed with several ancient scrolls, was already preparing to throw them at the monster. On the other side was Lee, who also managed to jump back and was already holding a strange object in his hands that looked like a blade made of chains. The guys immediately moved towards the ghost, who was already raising his huge axe for the next blow. There was a loud crash. All the power of the partners fell directly on this ghost, and fragments of stones flew in different directions, but the guys managed to jump back. Yoon looked at his partner and asked, "You said you were a materialist and didn't believe in all this nonsense." Lee just smiled. "It's a deformation. What can you do?" Stumbling upon a piece of stone left over from the ghost after the blow, our hero suddenly saw something strange. They were literally pulling together in one place. It turns out that this monster is not so easy to destroy. The stones began to gather back together, forming the body of the very ghost that the guys still couldn't destroy. As a result, the monster reassembled and now seemed even more dangerous and vicious. It seems that the guys only angered it. Swinging a huge axe, the statue prepared to deliver another crushing blow. The poor guys ran away to save their lives. On the other side of the mansion, Ching was wandering around, trying unsuccessfully to find her friends, but there was only darkness around her. The girl lit her way with a flashlight from her phone. In countless attempts to find anyone, the poor girl had lost count. She couldn't even imagine how far she had walked through the mansion. The space here was either distorted or simply circulating. It seemed that this place was simply endless. Suddenly, the girl's face changed. She saw a strange figure and immediately asked in a stern voice, "Who is here? Who are you?" Standing in front of her was a strange girl in a nurse's uniform with a frightened face asking, "You're not that uncle's drinking buddy, are you?" Coming closer, Ching was a little surprised. "What drinking buddy? Who did you even see before?" The nurse recoiled. Hearing that the strange girl had been with her companions, she understood. "But who were you anyway?" It was all very strange. The group blocked the hut in the forest after we entered. None of the civilians could get in here. "I have questions for this strange girl." Ching looked at the nurse with a searching gaze. Something about this girl seemed unusual to her. As if sensing her question, the nurse turned and said that she was just a streamer doing a live broadcast, studying all kinds of supernatural things. The blonde raised her eyebrow. "What? A streamer? Really? What are you doing in a place like this?" It was obvious that the blonde didn't trust her. But the nurse acted as if nothing had happened, stood up straight and smiled. "Yes, I'm the delightful, super cute Ai Yizhang. Haven't you heard of me?" But no, Ching had never heard of her, and the nurse was even offended. "Don't you even use the internet? I'm so popular, how could you not know me?" She waved her hand and moved forward. "Not only did I find nothing here, but I was also warned that I was in a restricted area. Okay, I'm leaving." King looked at her suspiciously and ordered her to stop. "Wait, I have a few questions for you." She looked at the nurse sternly. "If you want to leave through the main entrance, you won't get anywhere, I'm warning you." The streamer looked at her with frightened eyes. "What do you mean? Is this some kind of threat?" In a calm voice, Ching explained, "There is a spatial anomaly here, and we are trying to resolve it. Otherwise, none of those who entered here will be able to leave." But the girl didn't listen to her at all, and simply moved towards the exit, shouting, "You're lying! Don't you dare stop me!" But as soon as the streamer tried to leave, she immediately found herself back in the mansion and didn't understand anything at all. Ching looked at her condescendingly. "Well, are you convinced now, or do you still need some proof?" The poor streamer's face changed. She fell to her knees and began to tremble. How did this happen? There really is no way out of here. Approaching her a few steps, Ching asked, "Where did you meet my companions?" "I need to find them immediately," I replied. "There is a studio down the hall." They went deeper into the mansion and came across an aquarium with no way out. The situation was strange, to say the least. The girl streamer was still trembling with fear. It was just like in that story. She was obviously seriously frightened. Turning her head toward her, Ching asked, "What story is that? Have you heard something?" Making a scary face, the streamer lowered her voice. "It's a story about a scary ghost from the art museum. Legend has it that the museum director went mad and killed his entire family with an axe. And since then, no one who has entered here has been able to get out. They wander endlessly through these corridors in search of an exit, until they meet that very ghost with a huge axe who will chase them." The girl's face changed beyond recognition. For some reason, it turned black, and her eyes became too large for a normal person. Not paying attention to this, Ching just snorted and moved forward. The streamer suddenly changed. Her eyes turned black. Seeing that she had failed to scare Ching, the girl raised an eyebrow. What was wrong with her? Why wasn't she afraid at all? And besides, you didn't mention the person who was destroyed by his father and became a ghost constantly looking for a scapegoat. That's right. King looked at the strange girl with a searching gaze, apparently seeing something very strange in her. As soon as the streamer wanted to touch Ching, the girl's body was covered with energy pulses and a crackling sound was heard. Her clothes began to tear, and beneath them appeared an almost blue body like that of a dead person, and a piercing scream was heard. And now, instead of the usual cute streamer, a ghostly blue figure stood before Ching. Finally, the monster revealed itself. The ghost screamed, opening its wide mouth. "How did you even find out about this?" Snapping her fingers, the blonde smiled from the very beginning. "By the way, you're a terrible actor. We're in the same space, so you couldn't have crossed paths with my friends." Without saying another word, the blonde rushed forward, swinging her arms at the ghost. With the help of an electromagnetic pulse, she struck the ghost right in her transparent body. There was a crack and energy spread throughout the space. Feeling incredible pain, the ghost screamed. And in that scream, it was as if dozens of voices merged together. The pain was truly colossal. Teen did not stop there. She swung her arm and punched the ghost directly in the head, pinning it to the ground with a crash. The monster screamed something about the girl paying for all this and her father coming to save her, but the scream was lost in the rumbling. After everything that had happened, Ching suddenly felt her head begin to split from a strange sound similar to ultrasound. Everything around her was covered with a strange energy. The portraits on the walls began to change and blur, as if the images were changing. Lifting her head, Ching noticed that the ghost had disappeared somewhere, as if it had dissolved into thin air. Oh, the curse, she ran away. What a pity, but there's nothing you can do about it. Suddenly, she heard the sound of heavy footsteps behind her, as if something metal was scraping against the floor. Ching turned her gaze. Could it be her father? Meanwhile, Lee and Yoon were hiding behind the nearest doors, trying not to be seen by the huge monster. The boys were trembling with fear. Looking at our hero, Lee sighed heavily. Well, it seems to have calmed down. We can try to get out of here. Yoon just nodded in response. Waving his hand dismissively, Lee quickly regained his composure. Why did this scene seem so familiar to him? He had often seen it in movies. Everything was going according to the script. The two main characters thought they had managed to escape by hiding somewhere. And at that moment, when they had already breathed a sigh of relief and hoped for a quick end to this nightmare, everything went wrong. The main villain appears with a shout, "I found you!" And everything goes down the drain, doesn't it? And then it's all over. After this heartbreaking story, Yoon just sighed heavily. Well, you ruined the whole thing. How can you be such a bore? He peeked out the door and looked down the long corridor. Okay, the statue is gone, so let's not waste any time. Let's get out of here. Lee hurriedly jumped to his feet. Where are you going? Wait for me. Don't rush, Yoon said in an irritated voice. I want to finish the investigation. We've broken the statue more than a dozen times, but to no avail. We even used magical devices, but they didn't work on it. Don't you think that's strange? His surprised partner looked at him. Wait, you even managed to watch it while we were running away? God, you're a monster, Yoon continued. The statue is resurrecting suspiciously quickly, even for an anomaly. So I decided to observe the resurrection process a little. And then I noticed that energy was coming to the statue from outside, as if someone was trying to feed it with power. Lee stood behind him and blinked in surprise. You even managed to notice that? Who are you anyway? Our hero's eyes lit up green. The guys took a few steps down the long, dark corridor. Yoon nodded his head. Yes, I noticed it very clearly. They went up to the second floor of the mansion, where there was another long, dark corridor imbued with a strange energy. Approaching one of the rooms, Yoon pointed at it with his finger. This is where the energy must be coming from. He saw it with his pupils. When the guys opened the door, they saw a kind of art gallery with many drawings hanging on the walls, framed. The room was terribly cold. Lee was constantly shivering and his teeth were chattering. What are we looking for here? Our hero replied that he was just looking around. And finally, a special painting caught his eye. It depicted a knight and a dragon, and the painting emitted some kind of strange energy. Coming closer, Yoon lightly tapped the painting with his knuckles. It seemed to him that there was some kind of secret passage behind it. The guys managed to tear the painting off the wall, and sure enough, a hidden passage began to appear. They looked inside. Lee squinted. What else is this? Yoon squinted and looked closely. It looked like some kind of altar. Indeed, there was a small room in the wall with a huge mirror hanging in the middle of a pentagram. Above it hung the silhouette of a huge bat. Looking closely, our hero said, the talismans contain fire and explosions, so they are not suitable for such a small space. Now it's your turn. Realizing what was expected of him, Lee folded his fingers, and another money sword made of several coins appeared before him. He began to recite a spell. With a wave of his hand, the sorcerer aimed his weapon directly at the mirror. There was a squeak and a creak, and the entire space began to deform. What is this, guys? They finally realized that it was just a projection, a fake, so to speak, but where was the real altar now? But as soon as the sorcerer fired, Ching's voice began to sound in their headphones. The guys were finally able to hear her. The connection seemed to have been restored. They exchanged frightened glances. They needed to find her as soon as possible before something bad happened. Suddenly, something was reflected in the mirror. There were several silhouettes in some kind of corridor. Lee pointed there with his finger. Look, there's something there. Their reflection was indeed in the mirror. Ching stood there, ready for battle, waiting for the statue to attack her. Yoon immediately contacted Kasatka and asked if she could hear Ching, but the answer was negative. The transmission was somehow obstructed. Watching the real battle unfold in the mirror, our hero realized that he needed to contact her while the essence of the altar was on the other side. And then suddenly, Lee said that he actually had a way to do it. In the dungeon, he had acquired a skill called the drunken sleep mechanism, but still. Yoon looked at him and said, "Come on, tell us. Don't keep us in suspense." Lin picked up a bottle of alcohol and said, "To do this, we need to get drunk. But as you can see, we don't have any alcohol." He held the bottle in his hands and said, "I wonder where we can find that much strong alcohol. Well, wine, for example." Without hesitation, Yoon took a bottle of strong alcohol out of his backpack. It cost him a lot of points, but still. After that, several jugs appeared, all of them filled to the brim with expensive elite booze. Seeing such a large amount of alcohol, Lee swallowed nervously. His body demanded a drink. Yoon asked, "Is that enough or do you need something else?" The alcoholic smiled and said, "Of course, I'll go to the other world 3 times from drinking." He lovingly took the jug of alcohol and asked, "Listen, bro, do you want to learn a technique that requires elite wine?" Yoon shook his head irritably. "No, I don't need it, but I have a lot of achievement points, so let's try." On the other side of the mirror, Ching was trying unsuccessfully to destroy the statue, but it kept repairing itself at an incredible speed. Suddenly, in the heat of battle, the girl heard Lee's voice and looked away. "What is that alcoholic doing here? Where is he anyway?" Suddenly, a small spirit appeared behind her, speaking with Lee's voice. "We are in different dimensions and I have come here to tell you the secret of victory." The girl looked at him irritably and asked, "So what do I have to do? Tell me." The little ghost began to speak. "This statue is immortal. No matter how much you destroy it, it will be useless. To destroy it, you must first destroy the altar that feeds it with energy. Do you understand what I'm getting at? The altar is hidden behind a painting on the 2nd floor in the 3rd room on the left. Only in this space can it be destroyed." The girl nodded. "Now I understand. Every second counts. We have to hurry before it recovers." The statue had already returned to its normal state. Turning around, the blonde and the ghost flew to the indicated place, and the statue followed them with a crash, swinging its axe. On the other side of the mirror sat a frightened Yoon. It seemed he was very worried about whether everything would work out. After all, their opponent was quite strong. Suddenly, the guy turned his head toward where the painting was lying. He had an idea. Running closer, Yoon began to tear the canvas on which the drawing was painted. So that was it. The answer was closer than I thought. Meanwhile, in another space, the ghost led the girl in the right direction and was already pointing to the room. A terrifying ghost face appeared from one of the paintings. The monster screamed with a dozen voices, tearing through space. The voice was so powerful that Jing covered her ears, and the ghost flew forward, tearing through space. But suddenly, the statue swung its axe right at the ghost and split it in 2. Finally, the drunk came to his senses and, clutching his head, was already sitting in the room with the paintings. In another room, our hero sat and tried to get a better look at the painting. It turned out that things were not as simple as they thought. Hearing a rustling behind him, he turned around. Listen, drunkard. If you're sober now, then help us." Staggering, Lee came closer. "What are you doing here?" The anomaly detained the girl while our hero tore off the canvas. He turned around and snorted. "Yes, I already know. That's why I'm looking for a way. Look at that painting over there," the guy pointed behind him. Lee looked at the painting, which depicted people. A girl reading a book and a frightened man clutching his head in fear. Now everything became clear. Yoon shouted, "Here is the real painting. The culprit is not the father, but the daughter. She herself deliberately turned her father into a monster. In the painting we saw earlier, she wasn't asking for help. She was luring people into her museum." Thinking, Lee began to reason. "Okay, it's clear why she didn't let us into the museum, but what are you going to do?" The knight continued to swing his axe. Yoon explained, "I'm looking for her essence, to destroy it. What's so hard to understand? Now that she has turned into a ghost, her soul has been reborn in a self-portrait. That's the problem. So, if we destroy that very painting, we won't get rid of the ghost completely, but we will greatly damage it." The boy's eyes sparkled with confidence. It seemed he was already close to unraveling this mystery. The ghost was cunning enough and considered himself smart enough to divide us and kill us one by one. But here's the question. Yoon smiled and said that the ghost can only be on one side of reality, and that will be the reason for its defeat, because there are more of us after all. And then the guys began to tear apart all the paintings in search of that very copy. On the other side of reality stood a rather battered Ching. The girl tried with all her might to get rid of the monster, but it was getting worse every time. The face of a monstrous ghost appeared from the painting, and she screamed curses at our heroes. But suddenly, the monster sensed that something had changed. Her body began to fall apart into two pieces, as if someone had torn the canvas. Yoon managed to find the right painting, and with one swift movement, destroyed the canvas, thereby weakening the ghost. Her body began to fall apart, just like the body of the ghostly statue. The job was done. Having dealt with the painting, Yoon and Lee turned toward the source of the ghost's scream. Well, it finally appeared. Our hero cracked his knuckles. Finally, it showed up. Great, we'll have some fun with you. Now, the guys were face to face with their main enemy. All that was left was to defeat him. The ghost of the daughter, along with the huge statue, was already moving straight towards them to finally destroy the invaders. Suddenly, there was a loud crash and the statue, defying all laws of logic, crumbled into a pile of stones. The guy stood there, breathing heavily. Barely able to stand, Lee asked, "Hey buddy, are you still holding on? My spiritual power is almost gone." Taking out a figurine of some mythical animal, Yoon handed it to his friend. "Here, take this. It should help." Lee stared at the artifact in surprise. "What is this? Where did you get it?" But suddenly, the figurine began to glow brightly in his hands, almost blinding its owner. "This is a mid-level artifact. Where did you get it?" Trying to hide his surprise, Yoon simply replied, "It's just something I inherited from my parents, nothing more." Enough questions. Behind the boys, the bright yellow energy of the artifact spread, filling the entire room. On the other side stood a statue, which for some reason began to fall apart into different pieces before it could be restored. There was a monstrous roar, stones scattered in all directions, and our hero stood and blinked in surprise. The huge statue began to fall apart right before their eyes, the power leaving the ghostly body. After the monster was destroyed, the guys stood in place for a few more seconds, unable to believe that they had actually succeeded. And then Young's face lit up with a smile. It seemed that Ching had done her job perfectly. The ghost was destroyed. The mirror was broken. On the other side, the blonde, all battered and cut, came out of the room with her hand burning from electricity. The job was done. The ghost flew into a rage, screaming and demanding that the fighter get up and destroy the invaders. Joyful Lee smiled. "So, baby, do you have any more tricks up your sleeve? Or is that all?" The ghost flew into a rage, gnashing her teeth and shaking her head, even though she already knew she had lost this battle. Suddenly, the ghostly figure turned into a blob and began to move away at great speed, somewhere deep into the mansion. Realizing that the enemy was leaving, Lee moved forward. "Hey, stop, don't run away so fast." Yoon reacted instantly and blocked the ghost's path. He couldn't let her get away. The guy opened the ghostly bag and the massive energy went right into it. After that, our hero quickly tied the bag, in which the enraged ghost continued to struggle. Lee jumped up to him and blinked in surprise. "You caught her?" He couldn't believe it himself. Fear appeared on his face for a second. "Listen, buddy, this is an anomaly. It creates distortion. You can't just keep it with you." Looking at him sternly, Yoon said, "If you don't talk nonsense, I'll give you a jug of wine from the drunken immortal." After these words, he immediately shut up, but his lips were already drooling from what he had heard. He scratched the backs of his head, but according to the rules, he had to report everything to his superiors. Yoon began to bargain. "Listen, 2 jugs of the immortal's wine, 3 jugs of the emperor's pulp stream. Otherwise, I'll let her go." The drunkard did not argue with this. They shook hands. "I won't tell anyone. Now we are best friends." He grabbed our hero's hand and smiled. "The ghost is completely destroyed, and I didn't see anything." The drunkard's eyes sparkled with joy. Yoon heard a strange sound behind him and turned his eyes toward the guy. He was already tense, preparing for a new attack. They stood there shaking hands when suddenly a strange fog began to form around them, like a dark aura. As expected, at the most inopportune moment, Ching stood in front of them with her arms crossed, watching this strange occurrence. Realizing the situation they were in, the guys instantly jumped away from each other and began to make excuses. "It's just a coincidence, don't think badly of it." Sighing heavily, the girl adjusted her earpiece and asked what was going on with the energy distortion. The anomaly seemed to have dissipated. Sitting in her command post, the killer whale reported that everything seemed to be stable. The energy reserve was gradually decreasing, and the incident could be considered over. A barely noticeable smile flashed across Ching's face. "Okay, let's get out of here. It's time to report to the boss." The guys exchanged glances and smiled too. It seemed that everyone was happy that this nonsense was finally over. And so our friendly trio was already heading to headquarters. Lee finally got his alcohol and drank himself into oblivion. Someone's steady hand held a small piece of paper with a report containing graphs and figures. It was the same military man holding the report and talking to someone on the phone, discussing the details of the mission. On the other end of the line was Lee, reporting that the conversation was about Yoon. The guy said that this man had a good sense of justice, was smart and collected. Maybe it was his parents' legacy. At these words, the military man frowned, and a look of surprise mixed with disbelief flashed in his eyes. With that, the conversation was over. The deputy thanked the agent for his good work and hung up the phone. He was still clutching the report in his hands. Lee stood leaning against the wall and smiled, still holding the phone to his ear. Glad to help, it's all for the sake of our bureau. Meanwhile, in his new room, our hero was catching up on some sleep. He had just woken up and was walking around in his pajamas, scratching his head. Still sleepy, he wandered into the bathroom and turned on the water. The guy's eyes were still closed as he looked in the mirror. Cold water splashed in his face and the boy woke up a little, but to be honest, it didn't help much. Then he sat down in a comfortable chair and began to think, stretching out his arm as if he were some kind of king. In his hands appeared the very same white tiger amulet, and behind the chair lay a huge ghost cat. So it's all true. The boy began to count the days in his head. Only a couple of days had passed since he completed his mission. Could everything he had been told really be true? He thought even harder and bit his lip. Okay, it was time to think everything through carefully, because something didn't add up. The original sin is held once a week, and there's not much time left. And on top of that, there's something else. The deputy director said he didn't like it when Yoon used his privileges. Now he seems to hate him too. But worst of all, even his own parents' personal affairs remained off limits, and he couldn't even get close to them. He looked at the ghost tiger lying nearby and sighed. Okay, it seems that our cooperation will be difficult, but there's nothing we can do about it. He was interrupted from his thoughts by the ringing of the phone lying on a small table nearby. The number was unknown, and our hero became alert. I wonder who would bother him so early in the morning. Maybe it's from the bureau. As soon as the guy picked up the phone, a chirping voice came from the other end and began to chatter. Our hero even stepped back. The girl on the other end of the line introduced herself as Feng and said that she would now be his immediate assistant and coordinator. She was just like the scout, sitting in a comfortable chair in front of a bunch of computers. Yoon, as always, had no idea who she was, where she came from, or why she had appeared as his assistant. However, the girl did not stop. She began to talk about the previous mission, and that she was only a temporary assistant and that someone else would be appointed later. Hearing Ching being called the Bluebird again, the guy thought to himself, why don't you call her by her name? It's strange. Stretching out on the chair, the girl purred, you don't need to know that, just do your job. But in the end, she softened and said, actually, the Bureau often uses code names to ensure the safety of its employees. This is the first class of training. Sitting down in a chair, our hero said in a tired voice, I haven't been trained yet, so I don't know. You can laugh. Feng stared at the monitor. It's strange, of course, that you know her real name. Why don't you have a call sign? Didn't the system register you? To tell the truth, Yoon didn't know either, and he had to admit it. It's all a bit strange, but no one told me anything. The girl began to type rapidly on the keyboard. Wait, I'll take a look. A photo of our hero appeared on the screen. His code name was Ju Long. Strange, of course, but at least it was something. Hearing this, the guy froze for a couple of seconds and didn't even know what to say. It seemed like he was either scared or surprised. The girl was also a little discouraged. She even took the candy out of her mouth. Wait, 2 people use that name. She stared at the monitor and began to search for information. It was all strange, of course, and the other user was even classified. The other user's name was Lin Fen Yang, and his status seemed to be a deserter, which was even stranger. Hearing this, our hero was horrified. How could they call me a deserter and name me after a criminal? What are you thinking? Meanwhile, at the command headquarters, all the monitors suddenly lit up red for some reason, and the connection was interrupted. Feng took the lollipop out of her mouth and was a little scared. Wait a minute, I'll sort out these problems and then we'll talk. But the connection was lost. No matter how hard our hero tried to shout into the receiver, only hissing could be heard, and he was unable to find out anything more. In addition, his own phone began to malfunction. The screen also turned red, and a red warning message appeared on it. Biting his finger, the boy began to think. The one accused of desertion must be the elder, but if that was really true, then everything was clear. The phone started vibrating again, the connection was restored, and the boy immediately picked up the receiver. Yoon began to shout, I'm waiting for an explanation, but a voice came from the receiver. Ching, the girl, asked in a surprised voice, what other explanation do you need? When our hero didn't recognize her, the blonde got a little angry. Were you expecting someone else? Of course it's me. After calming down a little, Yoon said he was talking to his assistant. The blonde snorted, okay, I just wanted to say that your training materials are ready. Our hero hung up the phone and remained completely baffled. This situation threw him off balance. Shaking slightly from the surprise, he moved towards the exit. It was time to finally end this damn training. Opening the door, Yoon saw a man in an elegant suit holding a box in his hands and announcing, these are your personal belongings, please take them. Without much enthusiasm, the guy took the box and looked at it. His personal belongings were of much less concern to him now. The strange man had already disappeared somewhere, and now our hero stood completely alone with a multitude of questions. But he didn't even have the strength to be angry. His assistant still wasn't answering his calls, so he decided to at least sort through his personal belongings. Yoon sat down in a comfortable chair. It turned out that Depending on the danger, all these anomalies were divided into 7 levels in order. There was also the night level. The guy immediately remembered the stone man they had encountered in the strange mansion. But that's not all. There was also the bishop level. Monsters of this level can use several abilities and already pose a serious danger. The deity level, in turn, is capable of shaking the entire civilizational system, which is much more dangerous. But there was also the highest level, capable of causing the disappearance of an entire race. They existed only in theory, but the probability could not be denied. Thinking about it, Yoon realized that he now had the silver level, since the monster's level corresponded to the player's level. In turn, the talisman and statuette were not just abilities, but auxiliary items, like items. He wanted to get some more abilities when his phone vibrated again. This time it was his assistant. The girl sighed, and her joyful voice could be heard. It seemed that everything had been fixed, although she did not think it would be so difficult. Without asking any unnecessary questions, our hero inquired, "So, did you manage to find any more information?" In response, she just snorted, "No, of course not. What do you think? I'm tired of living, I'm not going to do it." Besides, she had only just started looking for information when she was blocked by a bunch of viruses and had to run away. It was a real crisis. She had to hide, but luckily she was a pretty smart girl, so everything worked out. "Okay, get to the point. Do you know this man, or is it just me?" The girl looked extremely interested. After gathering his thoughts, Yoon finally said, "Yes, I know him very well, he's my father." There was silence on the other end of the line. Feng even dropped her lollipop, her face turning gray with surprise and fear. Overcoming her fear, the girl smiled nervously. Could she really be an accomplice to a witness who was about to be eliminated? In a calm voice, the guy said, "You're my assistant, aren't you?" She had to agree. "Well, yes. You took the initiative, read confidential data, and obtained information that should not be viewed." Feng literally froze in fear. Realizing what she was facing, the girl began to cry. "Oh God, everything is lost. My high-speed internet, my new video card, everything is over." Yoon sighed heavily. "Is it just me? Or are you worrying about the wrong thing? The equipment is nothing, isn't it?" He smiled. "Don't worry. Dad is only suspected of desertion. So far, there is no concrete evidence, and besides, no one else knows about this except the two of us." The girl was still trembling with fear. There were shiny tears on her face. She was obviously very scared. Our hero didn't stop there. "Listen, I need your help. We're friends, right? And we should help each other." Cowering like a frightened kitten, Feng whimpered, "How can I help you?" With a smile on his face, our hero said, "I need a new ability. Do you happen to know how to get it?" Cheering up a little, the girl said, "Of course I know. It's not secret information, I'll tell you now. In fact, all these abilities are nothing more than energy, and the methods of awakening it are special. The fact is that distortion transforms the human body and allows this very energy to be released, which we call abilities. Exercises, spiritual stones, and treasures are the sources of energy that nourish the human body." Sinking into his chair, Yoon asked, "So what is the safest way to achieve awakening?" Sighing, the girl stared at the monitor. "Well, the easiest way is to receive a reward from the game. There are many rewards that can be obtained." Jumping up from his seat, our hero shouted, "It will help awaken the ability. Come on, tell me. Don't keep me in suspense." He had to wait a little while. All this time, Yoon paced back and forth, unable to find a place for himself. A little more time passed, and our hero was already beginning to lose patience. "Okay, it's decided. We'll do everything now." He stopped near the table. There were several strange objects on the table. There was a magic stone and, oddly enough, fruit. First in line was the Crystal of Sorrow. It could awaken the energy of fire. Its power lay in the fact that it burned the body and awakened new powers. Taking the strange stone, Yoon looked at it from top to bottom. According to the information provided by the girl, this thing should help, although it looks strange. "Okay, to hell with it. I have to try it." With trembling hands, he tried to put the crystal in his mouth. It tasted pretty good. Yoon thought it would be worse, but so far nothing had happened. Everything was as usual. Suddenly, the guy's whole body was struck by some kind of energy wave, as if he had been hit by an electric current. He tensed up. Then, clutching his stomach, he fell to the ground, and a piercing moan escaped his lips. His stomach began to burn as if he had swallowed a piece of coal. The pain was so intense that the poor guy doubled over and lay on the ground writhing in agony. It was incredibly difficult. His whole body was covered with a strange purple haze, and a notification appeared. The Crystal of Sorrow changed the physical state of its owner. Steam began to emanate from our hero's body, as if his temperature had risen. The poor guy tried to activate his spiritual power. The spiritual transformation was complete, and fiery energy began to spread throughout the owner's body, filling every vein. Clutching his head, Yoon slowly began to come to his senses. Now it was clear why it was so difficult. The guy tried to get up and punch the table where the banana and some strange fruit were still lying. Stopping, he looked down at the remaining food. Now he didn't really want to put anything in his mouth. Overcoming his reluctance, the guy took a fruit that looked like a large peach and began to chew vigorously. Okay, time to move on. He ate at a tremendous speed. To somehow change his miserable state, the fruit tasted quite pleasant. As our hero continued to devour these strange fruits, his physical characteristics changed and his endurance increased. He demanded that the system put all its remaining strength into improving his physique. Several items reappeared on the table. There was a small bag, several cans of some kind of drink, and fruit. Having gotten what he wanted, Yoon began to devour the food with a vengeance. In order to somehow restore his strength, it bore fruit. After almost an hour, he finally finished and, completely exhausted, plopped down into a soft armchair. Okay, now let's open the bag and see what has changed. A sign with a notification appeared in front of him. Yoon tried to activate his new power, and a small purple flame appeared above his index finger. Well, that's not bad. At least it worked. The next notifications appeared, stating that our hero had just completed a hidden task. Seeing that the help center was now open to him, the guy wondered what this was, as he had never heard of it before. The help center was a kind of hub where players could exchange their merit points for equipment before a quest. After thinking about it, Yoon realized that this was quite a useful thing. But what was he supposed to do all these days? The quest wasn't coming up anytime soon. Surely he hadn't sorted through his things yet. The idea came to him on its own. Taking a large box, which now seemed incredibly light to him, the guy carried it to the center of the room. In front of him now stood a small statue. It was the very mother of ghosts that they had stolen on their first quest. For a few minutes, our hero just stood and looked at the stone sculpture. Okay, now we have to deal with this. The system couldn't track the true power of this thing. It needed blood or a sacrificial ritual. Putting his hand on the shoulder of the small statue, the guy snorted. Who cares what it was in the past? Now it would walk on the bright side. Okay, in any case, these things are from the game. We need to put them somewhere. In front of our hero lay a small bag with a ghost that was still trying in vain to get out of the statue. From a distance, it turned out that the statue was alive and was looking contemptuously at the small bag. The phone vibrated again. It was Ching, the girl. Apparently, she wanted to say something again. I had to answer the phone. As soon as our hero picked up the phone, Ching immediately said that we needed to open the second copy of the game. The task force had already left, so get ready. It was pretty quick. Okay, it's coming out today. There's no choice. The guy moved towards the exit, leaving the statue alone. Pulling on his clothes, Yoon was ready to leave. All that remained was to hope that he hadn't forgotten or missed anything. For a second, he froze. Two agents were standing around him, staring at him the whole time without saying a word. This stopped Yoon. He shuddered. Guys, you have to stare at me like that. Your energy is so intense that it's scary. Where did that voice come from? The assistant girl said. It's their job. You'll get used to it soon. It's nothing to be afraid of. Sitting in her operations headquarters, Feng looked at the screen showing our hero. He was turning his head, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. The hacker looked and smiled and said, after all, it's their job to make sure nothing bad happens anywhere. Looking at one of the men, Yoon nodded his head. Okay, we need to hurry. By the way, is this copy dangerous or not? Taking a bite of a sweet stick, the girl said, yes, it's very dangerous. If they end up in the zone of action, their chance of survival is 10% at most. What should we do? These people will always be nearby. One of the agents nodded and seemed to smile. Okay, he had to agree, even though our hero didn't want to. He nodded and shuddered. By the way, here's another question. Can I contact you while I'm in the copy? Feng. No, we don't have that technology yet. Feng continued calmly, but don't worry, I'll help you deal with your emotions. That's my job. You can talk to me to relieve stress, which will increase your chances of completing the mission. The girl smiled and stuck out her tongue. But our hero simply said nothing. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. Let's at least chat. Everything around him began to change again. A notification appeared. There were only a few minutes left before the game started. Please get ready. There was a bang, and the guy's body literally dissolved into thin air, leaving behind only a fiery trail. The agents remained standing in their places. One of the men touched his earpiece and reported that the subject had entered the game and was now in combat readiness. Meanwhile, the boy's body began to move into some strange space. Finally, he had realized his mother's dream. Looking back, the boy saw that he was sitting in a soft chair on a bus, and they were going somewhere. Staring ahead, he saw the driver, a man sitting behind the wheel of the bus and steering it somewhere down a long road. The situation seemed a little strange. Yoon turned his head, looking for someone else, but it seemed that there was no one else on the bus except him. As soon as he thought about it, several more people began to appear nearby, still covered in that strange noise. When everyone was in their seats, a bald man with a tattoo advised everyone to calm down. He looked threatening, to say the least, and resembled a gangster. A crooked smile appeared on his face and the man laughed. You will obey, right? A frightened girl sat nearby, turning her head. It seemed she didn't even understand what was going on. The bald man immediately saw her and approached her with a smile. Are you new here? You haven't gotten anything yet? The poor girl stepped back and trembled. She hadn't gotten anything, and the situation frightened her. The man smiled even wider. So you thought this was just some kind of spam? Okay, you're going to lose your life. It's very funny. He started to come closer. But don't worry, I'll take care of you, girl. She began to fear and took a few steps back. All this time, our hero sat and watched. I wonder what this bald Hulk is going to do. They are friendly, to put it mildly. The man was getting closer and closer, and the girl was backing away toward the end of the bus. As expected, this man turned out to be a simple pervert. His hand was already reaching for the girl's chest. You can imagine with what intentions. In the end, our hero couldn't take it anymore. No, I can't watch this anymore. It's some kind of mockery. He stepped forward and with a deft movement grabbed the insolent man by the arm. The bald man looked at him in surprise. What are you doing, kid? Without further ado, Yoon squeezed the man's hand with such force that his bones cracked and a muffled groan escaped his lips. Clearly not expecting such a turn of events, the bald man's eyes bulged and he gritted his teeth. Where did this kid get such strength? They stood like that for several minutes, the man unable to break free from the tight grip and only stepping back. Finally, he managed to break free and jerked his hand away. Yoon said firmly that they had to complete the task first and then think about nonsense. The bald man looked at his wounded arm and hissed with rage, but still did not dare to do anything. Okay, I'll have to punish you. The guy looked at him with a fierce gaze, and his hand was covered with energy. The bald man growled like a wounded bear and, standing in a fighting stance, began to approach closer and closer. He ran forward straight at the boy, waving his huge arms, seemingly enraged. Seeing his opponent's hot hand, the man cooled down a little. Okay, I won't waste my strength. I'd better save it for the task at hand. In the end, our hero also calmed down a little at the furious gaze of his opponent. A notification from the system immediately appeared on the screen. Side mission completed. The hero saves the beauty. You have earned merit points. Suddenly, someone's soft hand touched our hero's jacket and a timid voice was heard from behind. The same girl, blushing with embarrassment, thanked the guy for saving her and immediately lowered her eyes somewhere down. Turning to her, Yoon just smiled kindly. It's okay. I only did what I had to do. Another man in a plain shirt, pants, and glasses stood in front of them and headed toward them. Our hero still had the watch-shaped indicator on his arm, but it was silent for now. The man in glasses came closer and extended his hand in a friendly manner, initiating the conversation. Judging by everything, you are from the Bureau, yes? They shook hands and our hero felt a strange energy emanating from this man as he called out his call sign. The man in glasses introduced himself as Ju Gae and immediately pointed to the guy in the suit behind him, whose name was Xiao Dao. They were from the same club. Hearing the name, the bald man turned his head in fear and looked at the two. Yoon also thought about it. Judging by where these people were from, they were some of the oldest players, which meant there would be team play here. Passing by, Jay smiled kindly and said that his new acquaintance could completely rely on him. Ji approached the bald man and advised him not to stick his neck out, as it seemed that he wasn't the only one who knew about that club, so he should keep quiet. He put his soft but confident hand on Bald's shoulder and said, "We need to think about the task at hand, don't we?" The man looked friendly, but something about him betrayed his strength and the fact that he was better to be feared. And it seemed that even the bald man, having lost all his fervor, became compliant and smiled. "I think you're right, sir." The bespectacled man removed his hand from the bald man's shoulder and asked him to apologize for what he had done. A handprint remained on the man's shoulder. There was nothing left to do, and the bald man with tattoos came closer, bowed, and apologized for his behavior. Ji clapped his hands. "Excellent, guys. So everything has been settled through our joint efforts. We can finish the job." Standing somewhere behind Yoon, he breathed a sigh of relief. Excellent. This man has established himself as the leader, which means half the problem is solved. But still, he's not that simple. He's just pretending to be kind. Although you can sense his strength, it's immediately apparent. He doesn't even try to hide it. Our hero sat down on a chair nearby, and the same girl asked to sit with him. It seems the guy didn't mind. We needed to find out some information, so our hero asked to open the help center. Interestingly, it was there. There were several items in the shop. Green tickets similar to money, data, and a card. We needed to exchange points. The bus gradually picked up speed and moved along a deserted road. There was nothing around but asphalt and endless space. Somewhere nearby, in some backwater, a pentagram was drawn on the ground. Someone's voice was heard. "Once he will remain alive, and the bodies will rise. No one will go against the spirits." It looked like some kind of pagan altar. There was also a strange skull hanging there, probably from a bull. Next to it were flasks with some strange green liquid. The voice continued to grow louder. "One will pass away and there will be many monsters." The bus stopped at some half-abandoned stop and people began to get out onto the street. The weather was hot. They stopped near a large billboard that read, "Welcome." The bus moved on and disappeared into the distance, leaving the heroes behind. People looked around, and suddenly the large sign changed, and red letters appeared on it. "Mission complete." An ominous moon hung in the sky. Then, signs with tasks appeared in front of them. As it turned out, our heroes would now be undercover FBI agents. Gabe began to rummage around behind his collar with his hand, as if looking for something. The man looked completely calm. Then a badge with his letters FBI appeared in his hands. It was an employee ID. It was interesting to see if this task was even possible. The difficulty level didn't seem high, but still. People began to glance at each other. Yoon kept his eyes on this strange guy and always kept his ears open. Dao approached from behind and asked in a somewhat frightened voice, "Sir, why are you saying that?" He was obviously very worried. In a calm voice, Jay said, "In your previous tasks, it was probably just a matter of surviving to the end, right? But here, there are conditions. The survival mission is certainly dangerous, but at least all the conditions are known from the start, regardless of your actions. The most important thing is to survive until the end." He took out a lighter and lit a cigarette. However, now, if certain conditions are not met, the mission will not be completed. The man exhaled. If the player needs to conduct an investigation, he will inevitably encounter some difficulties and dangers. The man put his hand on his companion's shoulder, so you have to be more careful than ever before. Exhaling a cloud of acrid smoke, Ji suggested that the game might have become more difficult. After these words, the people froze in their places and stared at him with surprised eyes. They had never encountered such conditions before. All this time, the man in glasses looked very calm, as if this were a normal thing for him. Meanwhile, our hero was also visibly worried. He just stared ahead and was already considering options for how to complete this mission. In any case, they had to act together. Only then would they be able to complete the task. Without consulting each other, the guys moved forward along the road. In the distance, they could see a settlement that looked like a village. On the way, Jie said that they had only one clue. One person had lost his life under strange circumstances. In short, let's start with that. Bald suggested, "Maybe we should go to the police. We have documents after all." "I'm talking about ID cards," he said. Dao's soft hand rested on his shoulder. "No, we can't. This was Zone X. The outside world doesn't know about it. The documents are fake, and most of the residents will figure that out right away." Suddenly, our hero's voice was heard. He said he had some thoughts on the matter. Coming closer, the guy saw a man in a wide-brimmed hat lying on a deck chair and sunbathing. He looked like a sheriff from a Western movie. Someone's fist knocked on the back of the chair, and the man immediately flinched but did not show it. The stranger turned his dissatisfied gaze toward our hero. Yoon began to speak. "Hello, I'm a reporter and would like to know about the recent incident." The villager snorted. "Are you crazy? You interrupted my sleep. I'll crush you to dust right now." But a wad of bills, suspiciously similar to American dollars, immediately appeared near his face, and the man immediately shut up. His eyes widened in surprise, and now he no longer looked so angry, but rather surprised. Meanwhile, our hero just looked kindly into his eyes and waved the wad of cash. "So, are you going to show me the way or not?" The man immediately shook his hand and smiled. "Of course. Give me a second." After a while, they found themselves in a small vacant lot. He pointed his finger in the direction of the house you need. John lived there. The players exchanged glances. Gay was smiling the whole time. It seemed that the man was pleased with this turn of events. John's house towered over the guys. It was quite tall and seemed to have been abandoned for a long time. The atmosphere here was oppressive. Finally, Yoon decided to ask a question. "Listen, why did John live in such a remote place? There's nothing here at all." The sheriff scratched the back of his head and adjusted his hat. Ever since his wife and children ran away, poor John had gone mad and then moved to this backwater. They say he believed in all kinds of strange things and performed some unusual rituals. No one knew for sure, but there were various rumors. No one ever went near his house. They said he was crazy because of it. His wife and daughter left because of it. The little girl left the house and took one last look at her father. It's not surprising. Who would want to live under the same roof with a madman? Finally, the team approached the house. It was sealed with tape that said, "Keep away," which is how houses are usually sealed during an investigation. Without thinking twice, they tore the tape and opened the door. "Let's go inside and see what happened there after all." The sheriff was a little frightened by such insistence and asked, "I have a lot of questions." Putting his hands on her shoulders, our hero said, "Please don't worry, we'll figure everything out when the police arrive." A friendly smile appeared on the guy's face. "By the way, buddy, tell me something else. What did this John believe in?" The sheriff thought for a moment. It was clear that he didn't particularly like to remember these events, but he had to. "Actually, I didn't know him very well. When John and his wife moved into this house, they were cheerful, friendly people, full of enthusiasm. A real family idol. 5 years later, they had a wonderful child. They were very happy, and it seemed that their happiness would never end. But their child turned out to be a little strange, always keeping his distance from other children and never playing with them. John noticed this too. His daughter was somehow different. The other children shunned her and were afraid to play with her. The father was so concerned that he even found local exorcists to cast the devil out of his daughter. But as you can imagine, it was all in vain. They tried to do something, but nothing helped. The priest couldn't do anything. Worse, This approach angered John's wife, and scandals broke out between them more and more often. In the end, the family fell apart. They divorced due to internal disagreements, and the mother and daughter left the house. Since then, John has changed. He lost weight, his face became gaunt, he looked more like a ghost than a human being, and he lived in seclusion. I know. For details, contact the police, Yoon asked. And you just said that John is not a local. Are there any details about his origins? The man waved his hands. Sir, I really have no idea where he came from. I don't know much about it, so I'm sorry. Suddenly, a noise was heard from the side. The two turned their heads and looked toward the house. The door opened. The man was clearly puzzled by something. Our hero asked what was going on. The bespectacled man smiled and said that Xiao Li had heard the sound of police cars approaching. Maybe they could clarify the situation. Sure enough, a police car soon appeared in front of them. Its flashing lights illuminated the surroundings, and an angry voice could already be heard from inside. The policeman jumped out of the car and immediately started shouting, "Who are you? What are you doing here? This is a crime scene." A stereotypical balding policeman with a donut in his hands started shouting, "Who are you? Hands up!" The sheriff tried to calm him down. "Max, listen, they're just reporters. They came to find out about the crime." But the policeman was relentless. He approached our hero and looked up at him. "Don't you know that this is illegal?" While Yoon tried to calm the policeman down, the others just looked at him from the side and exchanged glances. Max received a strange package in his hands, and the man looked at him in surprise. Inside were $100 bills. The man froze for a few seconds. Realizing that he had just been given a bribe, the officer threw away the donut. "You have a good ID, of course, but you understand that you can't walk around here as you please." Putting his arm around the man's shoulders, our hero said calmly, "We're just taking a couple of photos and would love to hear the details from you. We're not just strangers, we're good friends." The officer immediately softened and laughed. "Of course. Let's remember your name, buddy." Dao looked at his friend and said, "Listen, sir, is that allowed? In my opinion, that's a bribe to a public official in the performance of his duties." But Gay just smiled. "What do you want? To attract outside money or what?" In the end, our hero said goodbye to the sheriff, and the officer, by the way, also calmed down a bit and got into his car. Waving his hand, the man in glasses smiled and tried to be impartial, but he already understood that there was clearly something wrong with this guy, that he was not so simple. Returning to the house, Yoon said that Officer Max had gone to help us gather evidence at the police station. "What do you have here?" In response, Gay just shook his head. In essence, the deceased was supposed to take his own life, but he had some problems with the weapon. How could he have cut himself into several pieces by himself? It sounds crazy. Hearing such shocking details, the girl behind our hero screamed. Yoon just frowned and listened. "Okay, we need to figure this out." Show the task in front of the guy, and system notifications immediately appeared. There weren't many clues, but judging by everything, voluntary departure from life was not the real reason. Meanwhile, the fat officer walked around the dark area with a flashlight and a bunch of keys in his hands. The man acted as cautiously as possible so as not to attract unnecessary attention. It seemed that he was the only one in the area. Entering the archive, the officer took out a bundle of evidence with trembling hands and sighed heavily, wondering what he had gotten himself into. A cup of fragrant tea was already on the table, its aroma spreading throughout the small room. Yoon took the tea and drank a few sips, calming down a little. He needed to think everything through carefully. He looked at the girl and thanked her for the treat. She just cringed and became even more embarrassed. Standing opposite her, the bald man crossed his arms over his chest and snorted, "Listen, you couldn't find a better time for tea at a crime scene?" "Yes." The guy replied calmly. "I checked the whole room, it's clean, so don't worry. If anything, I have wet wipes." Opposite Yuna, Gay sat down, folded his arms in front of him, and calmly asked, "Listen, brother, do you have any ideas about this?" After taking a few more sips, our hero said, "At some point, the late John moved to the city. According to rumors, everyone here believes in sex. It's no surprise that the mission fell here." The girl asked, "Are we really going to Heishui?" But our hero stopped her. "Wait, we need to gather clues first and only then go to the boss. We can't go empty-handed." The doors opened. It looks like our friend Officer Max is back. Let's hope he has at least some evidence. Stepping outside, Yoon came face to face with a frightened officer. The fat man was holding a small box with a few items in it. Max shook his head from side to side. "Guys, you'd better hurry up. The fact that I'm taking this out of the station is already a big crime." Inside were the rest of them, already beginning to study the small pieces of paper. Yoon just nodded his head. Okay, we'll do everything quickly. Don't worry, you've already helped a lot." Saying this, the guy shoved a few more $100 bills into the policeman's thick hands. "We would never hurt our friends, and now you are free to go." Max just snorted. And now, the whole team set about studying the evidence base. They looked through the documentation, but so far there were no leads. Finally, the bald guy jumped up from his seat and shouted, "I found it! Look here!" In his hands was a small magazine with a photo of a man. It was the same guy, Tom Soros, who had died under mysterious circumstances. Turning to Officer Yoon, he asked in a friendly voice, "Listen, can you tell me what year it is?" Counting the banknotes, Max replied as if nothing had happened. 1957, why do you ask? Thinking for a moment, the guy looked at the document. The dates don't match, so it turns out we need to investigate a crime that happened 30 years ago. Suddenly, a girl's voice spoke up. "Listen, I found John's diary here. Maybe there's something interesting in it." She began to read. The book said that John was interested in various otherworldly religions until the moment when an evil spirit began to haunt him. She glanced nervously around. It also said that after John fled the city, the spirit did not stop haunting him. Apparently, he wrote this diary in a hurry, and all the people who participated in the experiments are now dead. At that time, John was sure that because of all this, the same fate would soon befall him, and the man was very afraid then. Finally, the girl slammed the diary shut with a loud bang. "There seems to be nothing here anymore." Looking at her, Yoon said firmly, "Listen, I think I'm starting to understand something." Still clutching a heavy stack of money in his hands, Officer Max raised an eyebrow. "What do you understand?" "I don't understand a damn thing." Gathering all his things back together, our hero replied, "Nothing of my own, just a few news reports." He handed over the box with his belongings. "Thank you, officer. You've been a great help. Now you can go back. And for God's sake, don't get caught." In the end, the officer drove away, and our hero remained standing near the porch of the house, watching as the car began to drive away. The officer pressed the gas pedal, the engine roared, and the car took off, leaving columns of dust behind its wheels. Joining the others, Yoon said, "I have an idea. Remember that children's song before we started the mission?" The girl began to recall that there was something about a person, about a spirit appearing, and so on. Our hero nodded. "That's right. Tom passed away 30 years ago in a medical center, and as a result, he was reborn as an evil spirit." G added, "Are you saying that line from the children's song was a clue?" Our hero nodded. "Yes, that's what I think." Finally, the bald man grabbed his head and cried out, "Listen, stop talking in riddles. I don't understand anything." In a calm voice, Yoon said, "The first line is about John. Think about it yourself. The phrase, 'the soul was never found,' may have the opposite meaning. It suits us. We need to find the soul." Finally, Dao intervened and said, "I can track the last moments of John's life, but I need more information." After a moment's thought, our hero seemed to understand something and had an idea. The guy turned around and went deeper into the house. "Okay, I have a little guess." Somewhere, the guy got a small shovel and handed it to Dao, who still didn't understand anything and looked at him in response. Taking the tool, Dao looked at his companions in surprise. "What are you going to do? Why do you need a shovel?" Our hero's face changed, and a mysterious smile appeared on it. "Listen, you said you needed more materials. Well, here we are going to get them. Now we're going to dig up a grave." Yoon said this in a tone as if he were going on a treasure hunt. Soon they found themselves in a local, half-abandoned cemetery. Dao held the shovel with trembling hands. "Listen, are you serious? This is an insult to the dead." However, Yoon didn't even want to listen. He armed himself with a shovel and began digging with sweeping movements. He looked at the others and snorted. "Listen, enough chatter. The sooner we start, the less chance there is of us being discovered." And the guys started digging. All you could hear was the sound of shovels hitting the ground and the heavy breathing of the diggers. Evening came, and the bald man sighed heavily and wiped the sweat from his forehead. They had been digging all day and had already dug a large hole. Suddenly, seeing the sunrise, everyone was frightened. Listen, wasn't it just dark? Night was just beginning. They heard someone's hurried footsteps. It was a girl. She ran towards them and shouted, "Something is happening here!" She bent down and started babbling something about fish starting to swim in the air. Our hero looked up in surprise. "What are you talking about? Did someone come?" But in reality, everything was much stranger. A huge whale was floating in the sky. It was translucent and blue, like a ghost. Everyone looked up, and the bald man pointed at the strange ghostly figure and asked what it was. Looking at the strange ghost, the girl said in a trembling voice, "They suddenly appeared from the grave." The eyes don't react, so they're not ghosts. Meanwhile, a blue jellyfish appeared from another grave. Turtles and various fish were already swimming in the sky, but they did not interact with the deceased, which meant they were hallucinations. The whole team stood surrounded by strange flying sea creatures, but for some reason they were floating in the air. Turning to the others, Dao, still clutching the shovel tightly, shouted, "There are more and more of them. What should we do now?" Suddenly, a girl grabbed our hero's hand and said in a trembling voice that it seemed like someone was laughing. With the shovel in his hands, he was ready to rush into battle when one of the ghosts headed towards him and turned red. The huge dolphin suddenly screamed and released a small bubble from its mouth. After flying several meters, the bubble crashed right into the bald man's back, and a strange gurgling sound was heard. At that moment, the man grabbed his head and bent over in half, seemingly in pain or fear. Yoon asked what had happened to him. Dao jumped up to the man. There were no external injuries. Apparently, it was a psychic attack. One touch and everything will be fine, but if there are too many, it will be life-threatening. Okay, then there's no choice but to fight. The guys had already prepared their weapons. Seeing that the talismans were useless here, the guys realized that these fish were just spiritual projections. So it was useless to hit them with ordinary weapons. Apparently, Yoon was not going to give up so easily. He charged his talisman with fire energy, and his hand was covered in flames. Throwing a piece of paper forward, the guy aimed precisely at the monster's heads, and a loud explosion was heard. Seeing that the dolphin was recovering, Dao was slightly frightened. Look, nothing works on these monsters. There were more and more of them around, and the guys formed a circle and tried to find a way to defend themselves, but the monsters were approaching rapidly. At some point, an idea came to our hero's mind. The laughter they heard might be the key to solving the mystery. They had to destroy the source. The girl looked at him over her shoulder and shouted, "I think I know where it is. Follow me." She waved her hand toward the forest and said that at first it was just a vague feeling, but now she could clearly hear something inside the tree. The guys looked at each other. Okay, now all that's left is to trust this girl and protect her? The whole team moved forward to a nearby tree surrounded by many projections. The girl ran forward in big leaps and pointed to the tree. "I hear something on the right branch." Charging his hand with ghostly flames, Yoon was ready to strike his target. His eyes narrowed and he concentrated. There was a rumble, and a ghostly figure covered in red energy appeared next to the tree. It was some kind of old woman dressed in rags. She opened her mouth and screamed so loudly that the whole team fell to their knees, covering their ears with their hands. Our hero also stood hunched over, strange silhouettes of doctors and some kind of hospital appearing in his mind. He had to act instantly. He held up the white tiger statue and summoned the spirit. A huge cat immediately appeared behind him. The surprised ghost turned its red, burning eyes toward the monster and stopped screaming. Taking advantage of the moment of confusion, Yoon moved closer to the old woman and grabbed her throat with his strong hands. There would be no more chances like this. As soon as this happened, the ghost began to dissipate into thin air, and gradually everything returned to normal. A note flew by, and our hero immediately caught it with one movement and began to read it. He jumped off the branch and went to the others. The whole team was slowly recovering from this nightmare. Pointing to the small piece of paper, Yoon said, "Test subject number 2 has special abilities, emotional resonance and mental shock." His face became serious. In addition, this piece of paper was from the very organization where Tom had gone to the other world in the past. Most likely, the hospital was just a cover. It seemed that everyone agreed, but the girls suddenly cried out and said that they felt that there was something else behind that tree. Turning his head, our hero began to examine the surroundings, but so far he saw nothing. There were only crosses and a large cemetery around. He came closer and examined the tree trunk. There was nothing suspicious here, just bark and earth. But suddenly a thought flashed through his mind. Could it really be what I think it is? He applied his gaze. And indeed, after that, a ghostly blue figure appeared in front of him. It was a man with an emaciated face. The others began to gather closer. Ji asked, "What did you find there? Could it be another clue?" Turning to the others, Yoon said that these were the remnants of John's soul, which could only be seen with his eye. Then the guy took out a small bottle with a strange liquid in it. It was bull's tears. "Take this, you'll need it." After everyone rubbed their eyes with this strange potion, they also began to see the cluster of souls. Seeing the ghost, Dao was even a little scared. "I really see it. It's John's soul, but how is that possible?" The girl grabbed Young's hand and asked why she was able to sense such things, since she was just an ordinary person. Our hero replied calmly, "You are just beginning to awaken your abilities. Some people gain power when they are near anomalies. You are one of them." He patted the girl on the head. "Don't worry, it's perfectly normal. You just have a talent, that's all." The girl's cheeks flushed, and she instantly became embarrassed, but she didn't show it. "Okay, now another question, Dao. Can you bring back memories?" The man sat down closer to the ghost. It should work. Watching Dao touch the ghost, the guys looked at each other, wondering what he was doing. The bespectacled man explained that he was synchronizing with the residual soul. A mouth with a long tongue appeared on the boy's hand. It seemed to begin absorbing the man's energy. In this way, we learned something else. The hand began to suck the soul out completely, like a vacuum cleaner. From a distance, it looked very strange and frightening. But suddenly, Dao cringed as if he was in great pain. The man fell to the ground, burying his head. The man began to change. Stubble appeared on his young face, and his voice changed. It was John. He asked who they were. Ji approached him and said, "Yes, John, you are indeed in the afterlife, but we want to deal with Tom, so we called you." The man smiled and said kindly, "We hope to get some information from you. Will you help us or not?" John, in the boy's body, continued to speak. "Evil spirit, don't come near him. Anyone who comes into contact with him." Yoon looked at him. "So you're talking about Tom after all. He survived that accident many years ago." The boy narrowed his eyes. "He became as probing a creature as the one we saw?" "Yes. John raised his head and shouted, "No! The evil spirit was like that from the beginning. He absorbed the souls of others and gained their abilities." The man screamed like a madman. "All these evil spirits are him." Yoon and Gi exchanged glances. The scene looked strange, to say the least. The bespectacled man was the first to speak, meaning that if the other subjects were his fragmented souls, then our hero was finished. Our hero finished, which meant that Tom already knew we were here. The guy leaned toward John and put his hand on his shoulder. "But why did he pursue you for so long? Why did he even leave an evil spirit here to pursue you?" The guy asked question after question about why he was here and what he was trying to do. Grasping himself, John began to shake with fear. "He doesn't want my soul to ascend. Everyone who participated in the experiment must remain here." It turns out that John recreated those experiments on everyone around him who was in this place. In short, he played God. After that, everything became a little clearer. Yoon thought, what if the city itself could become part of it? It's logical, after all. John raised his exhausted gaze. No, there weren't that many test subjects here. There was only a part of them. The rest were just toys. He raised his hand, and the boy's body began to emit energy. The last thing the ghost said was, "Save them! Save my Anna!" Finally, the spirit left Dao's body, and the boy returned to his normal state, his face calm. Standing up, he sighed heavily. "Well, I saw his soul, and that will be enough." After much torment, Tom's evil spirit captured his soul and put it in a kind of cage. That is why John went to the other world so tragically. A notification appeared in front of our hero again. The system rewarded him for successfully completing the mission. There were even spiritual concentration pills. If you take one pill every hour, you can increase your concentration quite a bit. Looking at his comrade, Dao shuddered. "It turns out that the difficulty of this task is even higher than I thought." Everyone agreed. It turns out that the evil spirit has already stolen an unknown number of abilities from its subjects. It seems that there is panic in the city now. It is simply inhabited by ghosts, and what is even worse, it can possess ordinary people and manipulate them. Raising his finger, Yoon said, as always, "Maybe I have a way to solve this problem. We just have to try." They began to whisper and discuss the mission plan. Their voices came from somewhere far away and were impossible to make out. After the discussion, Ji exclaimed, "Are you really going to do this? Controlling anomalies is strictly prohibited by the code, isn't it?" Looking at him with a smile, our hero said in a mysterious voice, "That's only true in reality, but now we're in the dungeon. It would be foolish to miss such an opportunity." Meanwhile, Officer Max had finished his workday and was already thinking about stopping by the car wash after everything that had happened. But suddenly, he heard a voice. Our hero was standing at the checkpoint talking to the officer on duty. Yoon said that they had come to file a report, and the police officer was a little taken aback. It seemed that he was also a little hard of hearing. Yoon was forced to raise his voice and say that they had come to file a report again. Officer Max immediately noticed him and waved his hand in a friendly manner. "Hey buddy, you got any problems? Come closer." The tired guy waved his hand. "Yes, we really did have some difficulties, so we came here for help." Realizing what the officer was hinting at, Yoon waved his hands and said, "Don't worry, it has nothing to do with money." He began to rummage behind his collar. "Actually, we're not really reporters. Let me clarify." The boy immediately produced his FBI ID. The police officer was stunned and didn't even know what to say. Putting his hand on his heart, Yoon proudly said, "We are from a special department for investigating supernatural phenomena from Center X." Max scratched his bald head. "Is this some kind of joke? It sounds like complete nonsense. Do you think I'm going to believe that?" But when a small purple flame appeared on our hero's finger, the officer took a few steps back, clearly frightened. But he still didn't want to believe what he was seeing. "Are you a magician? How am I supposed to understand this?" Extinguishing the spark, the guy called over Gon, which was the bald man's name. "Listen, buddy, please deal with him." The man punched himself in the chest. "No problem. I'll take care of it. Leave it to me." He lowered his head. His face darkened from the excess of power, and the man growled like a beast. Then he began to grow in size, and now Gon was several meters tall, like a huge titan. Beginning to flex his muscles, the man shouted, "My body is made of real iron. No bullet can pierce it, so don't even try." But suddenly, our hero's finger, still covered in flames, touched his hand, and a hissing sound was heard. The smell of burning iron hung in the air. Gan looked at his hand with surprise and cried out. After the touch, a small hole appeared there, as if from a bullet. The poor bald man grabbed his hand. "What are you doing, you crazy man? Do you want to cripple me?" Yoon scratched the back of his head and smiled guiltily. "Okay, I'm sorry. It was just a little curiosity. It won't happen again. Don't be mad at me." Meanwhile, Police Officer Max crawled back and asked in a trembling voice, "Are you really from Center X?" The guy gave him a hand and helped him up. "That's right. A supernatural incident occurred in Haishu, and we're investigating it. We can't contact other organizations, so we came to you." Max didn't even know how to contact their organization. Waving his hand, Yoon said, "Go to your boss, and if he doesn't know, go to the governor, and so on until you reach the president." Without arguing, Max immediately nodded his bald head and said, I understand. I'll go to my boss right away. He turned around and quickly disappeared into the depths of the building. Jay asked, Listen, are you sure we should have used that? Yoon snorted, It's worth a try. Soon the doors opened and a man in a black suit with black glasses appeared in the doorway. His name was William, the head of supernatural affairs. He entered the room and introduced himself. By the way, are you Pig Dragon, our hero? He snorted. By the way, the word pig can be considered an insult, can't it? Ignoring this, William frowned. Listen, we did send several agents to investigate, but they are not connected to you in any way. The man flew into a rage and slammed his fist on the table. Who are you anyway? And how do you know about Center X? Looking dreamily ahead, Yoon said calmly, Listen, don't be nervous. We're not your enemies, isn't that clear? Although the guy's legs were shaking. He stood up from his seat. Listen, you sent people to investigate, so we just decided to help you out of the goodness of our hearts. Still looking at the boy with distrust, William asked, Why did you decide to help us? Without looking at him, Yoon said, Because investigating this case is also our job. What's wrong with mutually beneficial cooperation? William looked at him. Are you offering me a deal, you little brat? Yoon snorted. I'm inclined to call it cooperation, nothing more. William shook his head. We already have the information you presented, so I don't see the point in cooperating with you. Realizing that the matter would not progress any further, our hero removed the watch from his wrist. Smiling, he suggested, Okay, then how about exchanging it for something very valuable? I bet you'll like it. This watch has a built-in Geiger counter, which is quite a useful thing. I think you'll find it useful. It can detect various types of distortions, which you call anomalies. I'm sure you understand how valuable that is. William looked at the watch with interest. Listen, can we run a couple of tests? Our hero had no objections. He sat back down in his chair while William figured out the watch. Let's hurry, we don't have much time. A few minutes passed, during which time Yoon had already fallen asleep and only woke up after William called out to him several times. The guy reluctantly opened his eyes and sighed. Well, you woke me up in the middle of a very interesting dream. Stretching, the guy lazily asked, So have you made a decision or should I wait some more? In an even voice, William said, After discussion, the organization has agreed to cooperate with you to solve the problem. Getting up from his seat, Yoon stretched again and yawned loudly. It seemed he had slept well. The guy gave a thumbs up and smiled. Okay then, let's not waste any time. Let's discuss the details of our fruitful cooperation. The town turned out to be relatively small and quite neat, but something was wrong. People were walking strangely. They looked more like zombies than ordinary living people. Their movements were sluggish and overly relaxed. Suddenly, a strange piece of paper with writing on it flew through the town streets and came to a stop. One of the men looked at the strange piece of paper with surprise and narrowed his eyes. His face was dry and emaciated. With trembling legs, he approached the piece of paper and bent down to examine it. It was a government announcement. People began to raise their heads and look at the pieces of paper that had been thrown from the plane. It turned out that the government was launching a rescue operation. Tears of joy appeared on the man's face. Could anyone really save their lost place? It was hard to believe. The man fell to his knees and began to sob loudly. They would finally be saved. Their prayers had been answered. He wept with happiness. People immediately perked up and began to quickly approach the exit from the city. They needed to get out of there as soon as possible. William was standing nearby. Next to him was a soldier who reported that one of the helicopters responsible for the delivery had already completed its mission. A car with a loudspeaker drove through the streets of the town, announcing that all residents must leave immediately. As a result, the soldier reported that all residents of the city had been successfully evacuated and were awaiting further orders. Seeing how quickly and efficiently the soldiers had worked, our hero clapped his hands. Bravo, Mr. William. Your professionalism inspires confidence. But the man did not even raise an eyebrow, only hissing through his teeth. It's all for the sake of saving people. This situation requires intervention. The sick and exhausted people finally left the city accompanied by armed soldiers. They moved in an organized convoy, with soldiers guarding ordinary civilians and asking them to remain calm. William came closer. Sir, now it's your job. You must identify Thomas's clones among the others. Get to work. Putting his hand on the girl's shoulder, Yoon smiled. Don't worry, I've already brought the right person. Leave it to us. The townspeople had already begun to worry at the sight of the soldiers. They had sworn to protect us, so why couldn't we leave the city? The soldiers tried to calm them down. The people looked extremely frightened, averting their gaze and trembling with fear, huddled together in a ball. The people were herded into a small enclosure, while the rest simply stood and watched this strange and frightening action from afar. Looking at the girl standing next to him, our hero asked if there was a problem. Surely there couldn't be, right? Without answering, the girl folded her hands as if in prayer and began to deepen her feelings. A strange energy began to spread from her hands throughout the area, and she began to sense people's breath. The girl could see silhouettes even with her eyes closed. Some of the people were red, which indicated that they were clones. She pointed her finger and said that she could sense 3 problematic people. Look at them. Among them was a balding old man with a malicious expression on his face, who was turning his head, a young man of indeterminate age with a vacant stare, and a plump woman with an eye patch who glared at everyone with her one eye. Understanding the essence of the task, William waved his hand, signaling that it was time to carry out the order. The soldiers behind him cocked their guns. Several shots rang out, an electric crackle was heard, and 3 clones were struck by an electric discharge. William waved his hand. Take these 3, scan them thoroughly, and ensure their safety. Having already folded all 3 in half, the soldiers nodded and began to carry out the order in unison. Realizing that things were going as planned, Yoon smiled and looked at the girl. Well, everything is fine so far. I'll leave the rest to you. The guy turned around and went in the opposite direction, leaving his girlfriend to deal with the rest of the refugees. Entering the tent, the boy wanted to ask if everything was ready, but immediately froze at the entrance. Gan was sitting there, wrapped in ammunition belts, holding several grenades in his hands like Rambo. Gao, armed with a pistol and a small stick, was already aiming somewhere, trying to figure out the best way to shoot. Dio put on a bulletproof vest and still couldn't get used to his new look. The guy felt a little awkward. Our hero looked at them and smiled. Well, guys, if everyone is ready, it's time to go on stage. It's our turn. The 4 of them moved forward to deal with the rest. There was still a lot to do, and they had to act decisively. William reported that most of the population had already been successfully evacuated. There were still a few dozen people who refused to leave the city. It was decided to send 2 groups of 30 soldiers to guard the remaining people. However, they did not possess any supernatural powers. So in the battle with Thomas, you will have to rely only on yourself. But it seems that this was not a problem for our team. As a reward for successfully completing the mission, Yoon received many merit points and 1 spin of the roulette wheel. As a result, he gained a special skill of the formidable cloud level, exclusive light movement. The skill had previously belonged to an ancient pervert, but it sounded pretty good. William pulled the guy out of his thoughts, came closer, and, shaking his head, asked what he was thinking about. In response, Yoon just smiled. Nothing special, just remembered something. He was delighted. His whole body was filled with energy. The situation was better than he had expected, with the mission ending soon and with minimal losses. He walked past William and waved his hand. Thanks for your help, buddy. You can leave the rest to us. The whole team moved forward into the city. They still had to find the remaining residents and deal with the clones and Thomas. Meanwhile, the girl continued to identify the clones. She was so absorbed that she paid no attention to anything around her. For the first time in her life, she felt useful, and she liked it very much. With her hands folded in front of her, the girl continued to work. Pointing her finger somewhere ahead, she ordered the soldiers to move in that direction. 2 people were hiding behind the trees. The soldiers exchanged glances and nodded. They immediately set off after the clones. Indeed, 2 men and a woman were hiding behind one of the houses. They tried to escape, but it seemed to be useless. Suddenly, a strange sound was heard from above. The couple looked up and saw shackles flying towards them. A sturdy steel rope with heavy balls at the ends wrapped around their bodies and pinned them to the ground. Soldiers immediately appeared and pointed their rifles at them. The people were frightened, but they had no choice. Holding a rifle in his hands, one of the soldiers reported over the radio that the target had been found. With a trembling voice, the girl on the other side nodded her head. She was not ready for such a harsh turn of events. Turning to the other soldiers, she realized that she had to find the others as soon as possible. It was very scary here. Meanwhile, the group led by Young moved deeper into the city. It was already somehow suspicious here. It was empty and quiet. Behind them, they heard laughter. It was G. The guy seemed happy and didn't even think that the task could be accomplished in this way. Initially, it seemed that they had to break into the city, meet Thomas's main army and fight, but there weren't many monsters here. The man waved his hand. Even if we got to the main boss, we would still be exhausted. His face changed and became more confident, but in the end, everything turned out completely differently. Meanwhile, the soldiers continued to chase the clones. Some of the residents tried to escape, and some hid. Patting him on the shoulder, Yoon said, "Don't blame yourself so much. For people in your organization, this kind of thinking is normal." Raising his finger, our hero said, "You don't have to decide everything on your own. If you need help, speak up and report everything. The state will always be your reliable support." Ji decided not to argue and just smiled. "Okay, man, I'll take your words into account." Someone's slow footsteps approached them. While the guys were talking, they didn't even notice the others. It was a girl with a soldier. The soldier reported that the road to the medical center had been cleared and all suspicious individuals had been eliminated. He added that the task of escorting Ms. Su had been successfully completed. The girl stood nearby, shifting from foot to foot. Looking at her, Yoon asked in surprise, "Listen, why didn't you stay in a safe place?" But the girl wanted to help. In response, our hero just sighed, "Okay, just stay close and try not to get into trouble." Suddenly, someone's scream was heard. One of the frightened soldiers ran up to them and reported that some of the fighters were experiencing auditory and visual hallucinations, which were getting worse over time. The man said in a trembling voice that if this continued, it could affect the success of the mission. He looked at the two guys through some kind of veil. Some strange phantoms appeared nearby. The state had already approved the request for evacuation. Snapping his fingers, Yoon smiled. Okay, I understand. You can leave. We'll manage on our own. Without waiting for the soldiers, he turned around and shouted in a loud voice, "Retreat!" and headed off with the rest of the column. He stood in front of the group of soldiers, saluted, and prepared to give the order. Dao and Gang stood nearby. The bald man scratched his head and sighed. I even felt a sense of duty, which was kind of awkward. The whole team moved forward. If they lost now, problems could start in both worlds, and that couldn't be allowed to happen. Forward! Finally, the whole team approached a huge building resembling the Colosseum. Clouds gathered above it, and the sky turned green. Hiding behind our hero's shoulder, a frightened Sue asked in a trembling voice, "So this is the medical center?" Without answering, Yoon turned to Gun, who was standing nearby, and asked him to break down the door. The bald man eagerly stepped forward. "Leave it to me." Swinging his heavy fist, he hit the door with such force that it flew out along with the frame. The debris flew somewhere deep into the building, opening a black hole from which a cold breeze immediately blew. "Okay, it's time to go inside, but be careful and look around carefully." Sue went in first. It was incredibly dark inside, and you couldn't see anything beyond your nose. The guys started turning their heads in different directions. Suddenly, there was a whistling sound from the darkness, and several sharp syringes flew straight at them. Thank God Yoon reacted in time and pulled the girl aside. 3 syringes pierced the stone floor with a loud sound. Turning his head, the guy shouted in a loud voice, "Whoever is there, stop hiding and come out immediately." A ghostly silhouette of a man appeared in front of them. He was dressed in strange clothes that were out of season. Behind him, several more syringes hung in the air. Behind them, they heard the frightened voice of Dao. He pointed his finger somewhere behind them, where ghosts were also approaching them. The whole group found themselves surrounded by mystical creatures reaching out to them with their pale blue hands. It was time to use the trump card up his sleeve. The guy took a white tiger figurine out of his pocket. It was time to go for a walk. A huge cat immediately appeared behind him and growled. It seemed that the enemies had decided to join forces and kill them one by one. All the ghosts began to speak with one voice. "You will all remain here forever. That won't stop us." Yoon lit his hand again with a ghostly purple flame. "Your plan is good, of course, but you haven't taken something into account." A sly smile appeared on the guy's face. He was clearly up to something again. Everything around us began to change. A cluster of purple energy appeared next to the main ghost and began to expand at an incredible speed. The man began to turn his head in different directions in an attempt to understand what was happening. His face contorted with fear. At that moment, the guy moved forward and grabbed the ghost by the neck with one swift movement. The monster's body began to crumble in his hands like sand, leaving only a few fragments behind. A smile flashed across his face again. "Even if you collect a pile of garbage, it will still remain garbage." Adjusting his sleeve, Yoon cracked his neck. "Well, who's next in line? Come on up. Don't be shy." One of the ghosts, a fat man, took a deep breath and puffed out his cheeks, preparing to attack. He released a blue energy ball resembling fire directly at our hero, but the boy did not move. At the last moment, the boy easily jumped aside. "That's corrosive slime. Too bad it's too slow." Swinging his arm, he moved forward at incredible speed and prepared his hand for the next blow. His palm, covered in fire, immediately slapped the fat ghost's face, burning his ghostly skin. Another monster was defeated. Yoon said with obvious irritation, "If you can't hit it, there's no point in even shooting." Folding his arms, the guy shouted loudly, "Guys, does anyone need help? Or is everything okay?" But it seemed that the others were managing on their own. Ji, armed with 2 pistols, showered the ghosts with bullets, destroying them one by one. On the other side was the white tiger, opening its wide mouth. It pounced on one of the monsters, intending to devour it. Gan stood behind him, ready to help. Despite everything, they were an excellent team. Yoon spread his arms. "Well, if you're doing so well, I guess you don't need any help. I can take care of the rest." The 3 of them approached the last ghost and looked at it with fierce eyes. "It seems you're the only one left, buddy." 3 minutes later, it was all over. Gan held a white tiger figurine in his hands. "It's good that you have such a thing. I couldn't have done it alone." Jia was approaching them. The test subjects had been destroyed, but the task was not yet complete. It remained to be seen where Thomas was. The man thought for a moment. It seemed that the real body of the leader was not among them. What a pity. We'll have to search. All 4 immediately turned in unison toward where Sue was standing, clearly signaling that it was time to act. The girl cringed a little under such intense scrutiny and said in a trembling voice that she would try to sense it again. The guys continued to watch and wait while she tried to detect the main ghost. Finally, the girl pointed her finger somewhere ahead and said she had found something. Only one source of energy remained. but it was well hidden, and they had to go through everything here to find anything. But so far, everything had been unsuccessful. Pushing aside one of the heavy boxes, Dao noticed a passage leading somewhere deep into the building and shouted to the others, "Guys, I found something." The bald guy asked what was written on the door. Dao said with a trembling voice, "Just one word, morgue." Yoon walked past them and said not to be afraid. In the worst case, the ghosts we saw outside have already been destroyed. The whole team moved down the steep staircase with only Gan standing behind, shouting, "Guys, wait for me." After descending, the whole team noticed a huge laboratory, so that's what it was. It turns out that the medical center was just a cover for this. They stopped in front of a large, barely noticeable door. Yoon asked, "Is it definitely here?" Sue replied with a trembling voice, "Yes, I can feel the energy." Behind the door, a strange scene unfolded before them. It was something like an operating room. A man lay unconscious on a couch, and next to him stood a ghostly silhouette. The ghost stood bent over his patient and muttered some strange words. In his hands was a bloody scalpel, with which he was performing the operation rather carelessly. The whole team stopped and stared at this strange sight, no one daring to move. The ghost continued, "They tied me to the operating table. No one was able to complete the experiment." His voice broke into laughter. Turning around, the ghost smiled broadly with his toothy mouth. "Don't you find it funny that those who conducted experiments on me couldn't survive it themselves?" Approaching him, Yoon was surprised. "So this is your real reason for taking revenge on the whole city?" The ghost spread his arms. "This is a real battle." Looking at him, the guy narrowed his eyes. "You've declared war on humanity, so you're not human." "Yes," the ghost laughed. "Of course not. We are not humans. Our blood belongs to the depths, and we will receive the blessing of the ancient gods." A girl with a gag in her mouth ran down the corridor, followed by two muscular guys. The girl was breathing heavily. The ghost continued his story. He smiled. "This battle began long before you were born." A sign appeared in front of Yuna. "Congratulations! You have unlocked a new fragment of the Tyra flows of the depths." The guy reached for the notification window with his finger. "Wait a minute, what is this notification about an abnormal condition? Something is wrong." At this time, the ghost continued to rant. "People are proud and arrogant creatures. They imagine themselves to be gods and will pay for it." The whole team suddenly began to feel a strange sensation. A strange haze began to swirl around them. Everyone immediately began to fall to the ground as if they were passing out. It was like a powerful gas. Everyone began to clutch their heads. Their legs weakened, and their minds began to cloud over as if they had been poisoned. Yoon smiled and looked at them. "Great, emotions are running high. What are you going to do next, or is that all?" Seeing that the guy was standing on his feet as if nothing had happened, the ghost was horrified. "How is this possible? Why didn't you pass out?" A small pill appeared in our hero's hands. It was a heart-cleansing pill that nullified the entire effect of the gas. The ghost couldn't believe his eyes. It was simply impossible. After all, it was the latest development of our medical complex, and there was no antidote for it. Spreading his arms, Yoon said in a good-natured voice, "Our cultivation methods are difficult to explain using Western science." Realizing that his plan had failed, the ghost gritted his teeth in rage. "Damn it, I have to get out of here." He instantly turned around and ran towards the exit of the building. He had to save his life. Looking after him, Yoon asked, "Where are you going? A minute ago you were so proud. Where is your courage now?" The guy launched a stream of fire that surrounded the ghost. "You know, you're the only one who knows how to stall for time, so this time you lost." He snapped his fingers. "Oh, right. You're not a physical being, so you can fly and pass through walls." After the snap, a fiery prison appeared around the ghost, restraining his movement. Now he couldn't move. Our hero thought for a moment. "Of course, I didn't manage to knock him out of the roulette wheel, but the ability to control spiritual power is not bad either." The ghost tried to break the fiery bars, but nothing worked. He only burned his fingers. The man jerked his hand and hissed with rage as the fire burned his ghostly structure. In anger, he shouted, "Let me go, you insignificant creature, or I'll show you what real fear is." Laughing, Yoon looked at the imprisoned ghost. "Why would such a great being need my help?" A smile spread across his face. "Can't you get out yourself? You're so strong, or are you not anymore?" Coming a little closer, the guy smiled and looked at him. "By the way, I noticed something. You control these test subjects, and they retain their abilities. So you can't absorb abilities, am I right?" The ghost hissed with rage and helplessness. "Most likely your skill is psychic paralysis." The ghost looked at him with furious eyes, even though he himself understood that his days were numbered. And our hero continued, "Most likely you wanted to use paralyzing gas to get rid of us, right?" In the end, the monster couldn't take it anymore, and asked who he was and why he was helping these talentless creatures. Looking at him one last time, Yoon sighed. "I am sorry, of course, that your people have suffered, but as you said, this is a battle, and we have our own mission." Now the fiery bars grew several meters and began to contract. The ghost screamed in rage and fear. Looking at this monstrous phenomenon, the guy took a few steps back, unable to comprehend what was happening. In the last seconds of his life, the ghost began to beg for his curse to be fulfilled as his last will. Soon you will understand. Repent. Looking at all this, our hero shrank a little. It all looked very strange and even frightening. Notifications began to appear in front of him. The system announced that a high level of chaos was approaching and a critical danger was imminent. Somewhere behind him, William stood and watched through binoculars. He saw a huge whirlwind beginning to appear in the middle of the city. A soldier immediately appeared behind the man, saluted and began his report in a confused voice. The soldier reported that the Geiger counter provided by Yoon had started working. According to the scale, the threat level was catastrophic. Looking calmly in this direction of the vortex, William cursed, "Damn it, what's going on here?" Meanwhile, in the underground laboratory, our hero stood and watched as a huge black cloud spread. Suddenly, a strange vortex appeared in front of him. Inside was a red core resembling an eye, and a low-frequency hum could be heard. Startled by the unexpected sight, Yoon took a few steps back. What on earth was this? The energy cluster was approaching, and the guy even thought that before his demise, this ghost had summoned some kind of spirit of darkness. Without thinking twice, the guy summoned a white tiger. The huge cat moved forward, opening its wide mouth. The monster was getting closer and closer. Without a shadow of a doubt, he wanted to destroy this creature. The tiger leaped forward, opening its wide mouth and let out a monstrous roar. But in the blink of an eye, the huge ghost cat was split in half by one powerful blow. Only a stone trace remained of it. Yoon couldn't believe his eyes. Could the white tiger really have been destroyed? How powerful was this creature? Realizing that the eye was now looking only at him, the boy cowered. Damn it, he noticed after all. I have to get out of here before it gets even worse. Meanwhile, the huge eye continued to blink and approach the boy, closing the distance. At that moment, our hero felt as if some unknown force had pierced his consciousness like an arrow, and he began to lose consciousness. His legs buckled under him, and Yoon began to fall backward, completely losing consciousness. Fortunately, the guy quickly came to his senses and tried to get back on his feet, but this enemy was quite dangerous. Just one glance was enough to cloud his mind. The eye began to turn toward the young man again. It would be bad if it noticed him again, as it could be his last attempt. Raising his eyes hopefully, Yoon begged all the gods not to let the eye notice him. Bending down, he launched a whirlwind of fire directly at the monster, while he could take advantage of the moment. If he could shield himself with a wall of fire, he could avoid its direct attack. It might work. The eye had already begun to attack him. The fire arrow was moving towards our hero, and the guy was trying to block it somehow. This was bad. His body began to weaken, consuming 10 times more spiritual energy than normal. The system displayed some kind of notification, but our hero already understood that he simply couldn't hold out. He had to do something, otherwise it would all be over. Without thinking twice, he poured all the strength-boosting pills into his palm. It was his only chance. If there was no other choice, he would have to act. The guy threw everything into his mouth and began to swallow hard. The boy's body immediately began to overflow with an unimaginable amount of energy. He could barely hold on. The fire began to merge into one large energy funnel, absorbing everything around it. The reconstruction of the barrier was almost complete, and the eye was already preparing for a real attack. The guy fell to his knees, almost completely exhausted. He managed to hold on, raising his eyes. Our hero looked at his opponent with a fierce gaze. But then he directed his most powerful attack, a huge fire whirlwind tearing through space, moving straight towards him. And then suddenly, Yoon felt an incredible blow to his shoulder, bent in half and screamed in pain. Thank God the blow was tangential and left only a small scratch, but it still hurt a lot. Holding his shoulder, the boy saw a notification. You have successfully prevented Thomas's revenge. Reward is being calculated. Meanwhile, the boy felt his shoulder begin to tighten, and the pain suddenly disappeared. He immediately opened his personal information to see what had happened. He had an abnormal status. Damn, I wonder if there's any way to get rid of this nonsense. I don't want to walk around with this label forever. Turning his head to the side, our hero noticed that all his companions were lying unconscious. Thank God, none of them were hurt. Yoon immediately ran up to the girl and gave her a purification pill so that she would finally come to her senses. A few seconds passed and Sue's face turned red and she began to cough. Thank God she was conscious. Lifting her head with frightened eyes, she looked at Yoon and immediately asked, "Did you get rid of that evil spirit?" Raising an eyebrow, the boy looked at her in surprise. "Did you see everything that happened?" Kneeling down, Sue said in a trembling voice that after she fell, she immediately lost consciousness. Leaning over her in the same friendly tone, Yoon said, "Okay, then just rest. You've been through a lot, so you can relax." The room was a complete nightmare. Everything was broken and smashed, and there was a huge hole in the middle of the floor. Meanwhile, while the girl was resting, our hero bustled around the other members of the group, trying to bring them to their senses. In the end, everything ended well, and the guys finally woke up. Everyone started grumbling. "What's going on? Why did we pass out?" The guy decided not to scare his friends too much and said that he had easily dealt with the enemy, who was quite weak, so there was no need to worry. Seeing the scale of the destruction, Dao's eyes widened, and he didn't even dare to say anything. He was stunned by what he saw. The entire laboratory was smashed to smithereens, the walls were covered with deep cracks, and all the equipment was irretrievably broken. Seeing him confused, Yoon put his hand on the guy's shoulder. "Are you unhappy about something?" The poor guy flinched. "If you say you handled it easily, then that's how it was. I won't argue." Ji intervened in the conversation, smiling and saying, "In any case, the mission is complete, and our comrade deserves a lot of credit for that. I wonder if you would like to join us." Hearing this proposal, the guy flinched. "Sir, it seems you've forgotten that I'm a member of the Public Security Bureau, so no." However, his interlocutor waved his hand. "That's not a problem. Our organizations don't conflict with each other. Besides, we have many people from the Bureau." He began to explain that their organization was essentially just a platform for people to communicate with each other, based solely on good intentions and without any coercion. In the end, he handed our hero a small business card with the words, "End of the World Society" written on it. "Of course, we don't have as much power as your bureau, but we have our own channels of information that are quite unique. This could be useful." Quickly taking the card, Yoon frowned and said, "Okay, I'll at least think about your offer." In response, the bespectacled man just smiled sweetly. "No problem. Whatever you decide, just know that you will always be a welcome guest here." Finally, the guy's body began to dissolve into thin air. The mission was complete, and now they were being teleported back to their starting position. All the other team members also shivered and began to dissolve into thin air, returning to themselves. Suddenly, Yoon turned around and said, "I almost forgot something." Approaching Ms. Su, he put his hand on her shoulder. "Please tell me your name and exact address, just in case." The girl blushed as quickly as possible and said that her name was Su Mei, but she did not have time to say her address before she dissolved. In the end, our hero found himself in his usual mansion, where the agents were still standing, seemingly without moving for a second. The guy was a little annoyed. Why was she acting so shy? Did she really think he was hitting on her? How silly. One of the agents, armed with a scanner, said, "Sir, we are now going to conduct a small analysis to make sure that you have not brought any otherworldly entities with you. We hope for your cooperation." When the agent approached, the guy shuddered. He had already forgotten about this procedure. The agent scanned his mental state. Everything was normal. No abnormal physical deviations were found, no parasites, identity confirmed. Everything was fine. After that, the man held out a small tablet with a piece of paper and asked him to sign here, thanking him for his cooperation. Looking at the document with suspicion, Yoon nevertheless agreed and clicked the pen to sign. But suddenly, as if on purpose, the cap flew off and flew somewhere to the side, hitting a small vase standing behind him. He heard the sound of broken glass, turned around, and jumped a little in surprise. At the last moment, he noticed with horror that one of the broken shards was flying straight at his neck, and his eyes widened in surprise. At the last moment, our hero dodged, and the shard flew into the wall, bouncing somewhere behind him. After flying several meters, it crashed into the TV hanging on the wall and broke the screen. The agent shuddered slightly. At that moment, Yoon wanted to sink through the ground in shame. How awkward it turned out. If I say that I'm just unlucky, will you believe me or not? The procedure was finally over, and the guy was able to return to his usual business. Life went on as usual. Our hero was in his room doing physical exercises, doing push-ups on the floor. After finishing the exercise, Yoon examined his body. Everything seemed to be in order with no physical abnormalities noticed. Yoon touched his shoulder and felt a slight burning sensation. He had brought something with him after all. On his shoulder was the very mark left by the ghostly entity. We can only hope that it only affects luck. After getting dressed, the guy drank some water and looked somewhere off to the side. Let's take a look at the results of our mission. The system displayed a window with information. This task was much more difficult than the previous one, although it was only rank B. Oh well, never mind, this is not the time to think about it. Cats with notifications began to appear around the guy again. He began to rummage through the store. He should at least take a look at what he could buy this time. Maybe something useful. He had access to another healing elixir, but it only worked on the physical body. It couldn't cure mental disorders. Seeing the price of tens of thousands of points, Yoon even whistled. This was really expensive, many times more expensive than the other items. He decided to buy as much of this stuff as possible, then he would be simply invincible in the game. But unfortunately, he could only buy one item because it was a high-level artifact, and this system had limitations. Seeing that the roulette was available to him, Yoon was delighted. Plus, you can get a skill here that you can use in real life, and that's really cool. Okay, even though he has an infinite number of achievement points, his combat abilities are still too low. Something needs to be done about this. In addition, he had access to something else, a crystal left over after Thomas's destruction. However, its properties were unknown. This is interesting. The guy took a closer look and thought about it. It's probably dangerous, but damn interesting. I wonder what it is. Then his face changed. Wait a minute. The system just said that this thing contains a strange energy. I didn't hear wrong. He turned his head toward a small chest of drawers on which stood a statuette of a goddess from a previous assignment. If he was not mistaken, this thing also possessed a strange energy. The statuette watched the events in the room with the same lifeless gaze, its hands folded in a prayerful gesture. Yoon froze in place and looked at the statue. It seemed that this thing could be fed to the ghost mother. Let's see what happens then. And then he began to buy first the wheel of skills and then the essence itself. Well, let's try it. A crystal appeared in the guy's hands. He slowly approached the statue, still hesitating. He placed the crystal nearby and waited, but a minute passed, then two, and nothing happened. Everything was as usual. The poor guy grabbed his head. Did I do something wrong? Why isn't anything working? As soon as he said that, the statue's eyes began to glow with a strange energy that filled the entire room. The crystal began to strain and eventually shattered into dozens of small fragments. A strange demonic energy appeared around him. Yoon took a couple of steps back. What was this? What had happened? The guy looked up. The energy continued to ooze out. Was this what they had talked about in the store? The statue continued to absorb the energy, which suddenly began to transform into a strange circle. He had to cover his face with his hands so as not to get hurt. The energy was really powerful, and the absorption worked as it should. The statue began to absorb not only energy, but everything in the room. Books began to fly off their shelves. But in the end, fortunately, it all ended. Yoon breathed a sigh of relief. This thing is more dangerous than I thought. Mother, you really do have an excellent appetite. As soon as the guy said that, the statue seemed to penetrate his brain and shouted, "How dare you!" Hearing the voice in his head, Yoon fell to the ground and began to crawl backward. "Mommy, the statue is talking," he said. But the statue continued, "You insolent boy. You brought me into this world without permission. I haven't had time to punish you for such an attempt, and now you're complaining." Coming to his senses, our hero approached the statue and looked at it with wide eyes. "You are indeed the mother of the underworld." The statue snorted indignantly. "You dare to doubt my abilities, mortal?" Realizing that it was better not to joke with this thing, Yoon waved his hands. No, of course I believe you. I sense a strange dark energy in you, but right now I have only managed to restore part of my powers. I cannot use them recklessly. Bring me more energy." The frightened guy sighed heavily. It seemed that he had really brought an unknown deity from the other world into the house, and now what to do? As luck would have it, his phone vibrated. It was Ching. The girl apparently wanted to make sure that everything had gone well on the previous mission. With trembling hands, Yoon picked up the phone and greeted his boss, trying not to give himself away. However, the girl immediately understood everything and asked, "What's wrong with you? Your voice sounds too tired. Did something happen to you?" It seemed that this girl knew absolutely everything. She had just received a report that Yoon had encountered extreme bad luck. Tell her whether something happened or not. Sinking into a chair, Yoon finally decided to tell her that something unpleasant had happened. Actually, it was a long story, but it seemed there was no choice. The guy sincerely did not want to give himself away. Apparently, Ching was in a bad mood and snapped, "In that case, send me a detailed written report. We need to know everything that's going on in this game." The events moved to the Public Security Bureau. Yes, our hero still had to drag himself here with the report. And now, he was sitting pale in the boss's office while the blonde checked the report. Finally, she asked if he had anything to add. Before the guy could say anything, the door flew open and a frightened professor appeared in the doorway. It seemed he was looking for him. Seeing at least one familiar face, Yoon gathered his remaining strength and waved to the old man. "I'm here. Were you looking for me?" "Yes." The professor leaned over the guy. "Your previous report said that an anomaly had invaded the dungeon." Holding his head, the guy nodded. The professor began to pace back and forth and think hard. "So that's how it is. So I wasn't wrong. I knew it, my guess was right. But it seems that only the professor knew about it. The others had no idea what he was talking about." There was a knock at the door. One of the agents was standing on the threshold. He handed the chief a few sheets of paper. The girl snorted and asked the professor to calm down a little. First, he should explain what was going on with this guy. Clearing his throat, the professor took on a serious expression. "According to the information you gave us, this is what we found out. There is only one entity on your mark, and it corresponds to the title and appearance. The Herald of Disaster, Chaos. That's who's on your tattoo." That didn't help, and the guy asked again what this nonsense was. The professor clenched his hands around his helmet. Simply put, it's an evil spirit, or a deity. The boss handed Yuna a sheet of paper. 6 months ago, the group encountered people who worshipped this creature. At that time, the dungeon was styled after 18th century England. The cult of disasters had taken over London and was preparing a ritual of invocation. It was quite difficult for the agent, but fortunately he managed to cope, or at least partially. According to beliefs, anyone who falls under the gaze of this evil deity will be haunted by a huge number of misfortunes, and in the end, the whole world will plunge into chaos. The girl folded her arms across her chest. So, the mark on your shoulder fits the description perfectly. While the guy was listening, he managed to cut himself on a simple piece of paper and cried out in surprise. In a plaintive voice, the poor guy asked, "Listen, isn't there any way to remove this curse?" "Well, look in the archives. I don't know." The professor spread his hands. "No. Unfortunately, the essence of the task was to disrupt the ritual, so the star of misfortune never came down to earth." The man put his hands on his shoulder. "However, it turns out that you are the only person who encountered it." It seems that our hero was not particularly happy about this. He just looked somewhere to the side with a frightened look. What a bastard. So lucky, so lucky. Removing the professor's hand from his shoulder, Yoon sighed. "Listen, if you don't figure out what to do about this, I'm not likely to live long." King handed him a small talisman with a strange hieroglyphic symbol on it. Looking at the strange object with surprise, the guy asked what it was. The boss replied that this talisman of luck was a temporary solution, but not a panacea. "This thing will compensate for your lack of luck, at least for a while, so that it doesn't interfere with your work." Grabbing this thing as if it were his only lifeline, Yoon sighed heavily. Well, thank God for at least some kind of solution. Looking at him, Ching became stern. "Don't rejoice prematurely. We have two big problems. So listen. First, your bad luck will grow, and the amount of luck contained in this talisman is limited, so it will eventually break. That's understandable, so the guy will still have to find a way to get rid of this disaster. And secondly," King approached him and looked down at him. "The second problem is money." Pretending not to understand, the guy scratched his ear. "What are you talking about?" Blushing slightly, the girl said, "It's a very expensive thing. We can't just throw it away. You have to give us something of equal value in return." "Well, that's not a problem." A second later, there were many artifacts, scrolls, and miraculous potions on the table. Pointing at them, Yoon said, "If you need anything else, no problem. I have plenty more, so don't be shy." The professor almost lost his mind with joy. Just think, where did this guy get so many magical artifacts? Where did he get them? Scratching the back of his head shyly, Yoon said, "Yes, they're just trifles. These things can't keep up with my growth anyway. But there are a lot of them, and as for the source, it doesn't matter. Let's just say it's my parents' inheritance." But the professor didn't care. He reached out with his hands toward these countless treasures. Finally coming to his senses, the man cleared his throat. "Okay, let's get back to the point. We have some more information about your parents." Hearing this, our hero perked up and forgot about his curse. "Come on, don't keep me in suspense. Tell me." He slammed his hands on the table with such force that the pills almost flew off. "Tell me everything. Where did you find them?" The professor waved his hands. "Unfortunately, not yet, but I have something for you." The man took a small, heavy book from behind his back. "Here, read this. I think you'll find it useful." With hands trembling with impatience, Yoon took the book. "It's an auction catalog. But why do I need it?" The professor cleared his throat. "In a few days, there will be a major auction organized by people from the black market, the Blackstone Trading House. In your hands is a list of goods. Now, look at the third page." The guy began to eagerly flip through the pages in search of the one he needed. Before his eyes appeared an image of a strange bottle with an even stranger symbol. "That's what we need." Suddenly, the guy was immersed in his childhood memories when his father made toy cars for him a long time ago. It was a wonderful time when our hero felt completely carefree and safe, which was the most important thing. Back then, as a child, he also noticed the same strange symbol, and it caught his attention. Looking at the strange triangles with wide eyes, the boy asked his father, "What is this symbol?" His father patted him on the head and said that he always put this mark on his inventions so that his son would know whose they were. Now Yoon was interested. "Okay, let's say I know what this symbol is, but what is this bottle?" The professor replied, "This is my beacon." The man raised his finger. "In the game, the original sin cycle starts every week, and this thing allows you to start it at any time, so you understand how valuable it is." Slamming the book shut, Yoon asked loudly, "Okay, that's clear, but why is my father's name on it?" The man sighed heavily. "We don't know yet, but here's what we do know. From time to time, players find things like this and get information. That's why it says possible defector." After hearing this, Yoon thought for a moment. "So you know what's going on?" The professor winked. "You didn't think, kid, that your call sign and the fact that Feng became your supervisor were just a coincidence, did you?" Seeing the surprise in the boy's eyes, the professor continued, "Even though the Bureau recognized your father as a traitor, many disagree with that. We deliberately gave you information. We have to." Still holding the book in his hands, the guy seemed to understand. "So you want me to go to this auction and buy the lighthouse?" "Yes." The boss snatched the reference book from his hands with a sharp movement, almost dropping it on the floor. "First of all, it's not you, but us. We have been tasked with representing the Bureau at this auction. The bosses have given their consent, so don't worry." The professor smiled. "Not only that, but I managed to get you a small team and accommodation, so consider yourself lucky." Suddenly, the professor put his hand on the boss's shoulder. The girl flinched a little in surprise. The man brought the two of them together. Well, guys, now you'll be living in the same house. If anything happens to the talisman, Ching will help you. Our hero didn't even have time to say anything. He just opened his mouth and froze in bewilderment. Are you kidding me? The train rushed forward, gradually picking up speed, its wheels clattering on the rails. All around were endless thickets and green fields. Our hero and his boss sat in one of the compartments at a small table. The girl lowered her head and stared at a piece of paper. Yoon was the first to speak. Listen, the older generation really likes to bring people together. We should discuss this with my uncle. Without looking up, the boss said there was no need for that. Each team is given a 3-story building. It's not communal living like you thought. So that's how our hero blushed a little and folded his arms across his chest. No wonder you're a serious office. Ching snorted and said that she didn't really mind. Hearing this, the guy slumped into his chair and slid to the floor. Wait, what did you just say? Clicking her pen, the blonde looked at him intently. You've been funding the shelter for several years, right? So answer me, why? Yoon came to his senses a little. Well, I'm an orphan myself. And besides, I could earn some merit points. The boss immediately began to write something down on her notepad. So that's a pretty good answer. Meanwhile, Feng was standing in the office with the professor, chewing her lollipop as usual. Listen, old man, why did you send the captain with this guy? He can't handle it. Looking at her, the old man smiled. You don't understand. Our captain is also an orphan. Didn't you know that? The girl raised an eyebrow and looked at him. So what? Half of our curators are orphans. What difference does that make? The old man just smiled. You're still young. You don't understand anything, girl. She just snorted. That's why I hate you. Ignoring her bravado, the old man buried himself in the papers and began to study something with interest. A few seconds later, he exhaled heavily and grabbed his head. Well, the apocalypse sect is acting up again. Meanwhile, a man appeared in the large office. He approached the chair where another boss was sitting. You called for me? Yes. The other man, sitting in a large chair, smoked a thick cigar and ordered a group to be assembled and sent to the auction. The mercenary with a large scar across his eye snorted. But isn't that what the rotten blood is doing? The boss replied that we need the lighthouse to go either to us or to the security bureau. You get it. It's all because they sent the prophet's son there. At the same time, we'll check what he's capable of. Meanwhile, 2 identical guys stood in front of the captain and begged him to check them out. He's the real deal. In front of these men stood a little boy clutching his sword. Damn, it's just impossible to tell. The boy was trembling all over and trying to understand where the fake was in front of him, but it was very difficult. The 2 men wept bitterly, anticipating their imminent demise, and each wanted to prove he was right. The boy tensed up and gritted his teeth. It was harder than expected, but a choice had to be made. Metal creaked as the boy pulled a long blade from its sheath and prepared to strike. He pointed at the man standing on the left and shouted, "You are the fake. Don't even think about denying it." Immediately, a small cut appeared on the man's throat, from which blood began to flow, and his wheezing could be heard. In less than a couple of seconds, the poor man fell to the floor and showed no signs of life. The other man just laughed quietly to himself. Only then did the boy realize that he had made a terrible mistake. His body was covered with goosebumps and his face turned pale. The second man got up, dusted himself off, and came closer. "It's a pity, boy, but you were wrong." The man's face began to deform, his mouth stretched into a natural smile that reached his ears. The poor boy didn't even know what to do. He curled up and realized that this mistake could now cost him his life. Deciding to fight, the child swung his sword and tried to destroy his enemy, but the man simply dissolved into thin air like a ghost, and immediately reassembled as if it were made of smoke, the smile itself. "Your chance is gone, kid." A strange purple energy began to seep around him. It seemed to be darkness. The poor boy fell to the ground. He screamed, burying his face in the floor, and only now realized what a monstrous mistake he had made. Meanwhile, several agents began their report. Containment of the anomaly had failed. Only one person survived. I repeat, only one survived. The phone lying on a small table vibrated. An interesting file had arrived. Yoon and Ching simultaneously picked up their phones and began to study it with surprised eyes. The guy stretched because his bones were creaking. He obviously wanted to rest a little before the auction, but it seemed that it would not be possible, which was a pity. The boss took a small headset out of the box and said that if this task was worth the lives of an entire squad, then it was definitely not an easy one. After connecting the headset, she asked her assistant to send complete information about this task immediately. The text immediately appeared on the phone. Mirror Torok appeared only 2 days ago. Radius of destruction 30 meters. Type Wandering Anomaly. Seeing that a squad of demons had been assigned to this mission, the girl just sighed. God, how could they have made such a mistake? Yoon looked at her in surprise. What's wrong with them? The boss just sighed. Haven't you heard about them? They're just a bunch of problem children. Their mission completion rates are certainly high, but they don't care at all about losses during the operation. Especially their captain with the call sign Demon. He's a whole different story. He lost all his people, so you can't count on him to be cooperative. The train had already arrived at the station and screeched to a halt near the platform. The partners got out, where an agent was already waiting for them. The man approached them and began his report. Over the past few hours, they had managed to gather not much information. As soon as our hero stepped outside, he immediately felt a strange, oppressive aura that filled everything around him. He reacted immediately and quickly pushed the agent aside. The man only had time to cry out. Another person approached them, swinging his sword and delivering a powerful blow that cut through the concrete. It was a boy, seemingly the same demon, who emitted a monstrous aura that filled everything around him. The agents immediately prepared to fight back. It seemed that this mission promised to be a very long one. The man in the suit had apparently recognized the boy and tried to stop him, but the demon had no intention of stopping. He just wanted revenge. "Don't worry, I'll just take their limbs off. It's not as scary as it could be." The boy jumped up and, swinging his long sword, moved towards our heroes with the clear intention of taking their lives. Using his ghostly flash, he gathered all his energy into his fist and swung his blade to strike. Yoon already saw the danger approaching him and became alert. It seemed that this guy was not joking. A fight broke out, the blade flashing in the air and passing a few centimeters from our hero's neck. Their eyes met, and it was clear that neither of them was going to back down. The fight promised to be a long one.